The ancient world was not built to impress us. It was built to serve the people who lived in it. Temples are places of worship. Fortresses defended borders. Roads connected communities. Reservoirs supplied water. Yet thousands of years later, many of these same places seem far more extraordinary than their creators could have imagined. Not because they still stand, but because so much of the knowledge surrounding them has disappeared. We see the results, but not always the process. We see the achievement, but not always the reasoning behind it. Across the world, ancient structures continue to raise questions about engineering, planning, survival, and human ingenuity. They remind us that history is not just a record of what happened, it is also a record of what has been forgotten. Sumer is often called the world's first civilization, yet the greatest mystery surrounding it is not that it existed, but how it appeared with such astonishing sophistication. In the flat alluvial plains of southern Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, a people emerged more than 5,000 years ago and created cities, mathematics, writing, engineering systems, and administrative networks on a scale humanity had never seen before. What makes Sumer so fascinating is that many of its technological achievements seem to appear suddenly in the archaeological record, leaving researchers to wonder whether we're still missing crucial chapters of humanity's earlier scientific development. The story began in the 19th century when archaeologists excavating ancient mounds across Mesopotamia uncovered thousands of clay tablets covered in strange wedge-shaped symbols. Sites such as Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur gradually revealed the remains of a civilization that had flourished between roughly 4,500 and 1900 BCE. As more discoveries emerged, scholars realized they were looking at something extraordinary. Long before the pyramids of Egypt reached their greatest form and nearly 2,000 years before classical Greece, the Sumerians had already built large urban centers, organized governments, and developed technologies that would influence the next 4 millennia of human history. One of the first puzzles concerns the sudden rise of cities. The city of Uruk may have supported between 40,000 and 80,000 inhabitants around 3,200 BCE, making it one of the largest urban centers on Earth at the time. Yet southern Mesopotamia lacked many of the resources normally associated with the growth of complex civilizations. There were few stone quarries, limited timber supplies, and almost no local metal deposits. Despite these disadvantages, the Sumerians created massive cities connected by trade networks stretching hundreds and sometimes thousands of kilometers. Archaeologists continue to debate how such large-scale urban organization emerged so rapidly. The transition from scattered farming communities to densely populated cities appears unusually fast compared with many other ancient regions. The engineering challenge facing the Sumerians was even more remarkable. Southern Mesopotamia was both fertile and dangerous. The Tigris and the Euphrates rivers provided water and rich sediments, but their flooding patterns were unpredictable. Too little water meant crop failure. Too much water could destroy entire settlements. To survive, the Sumerians constructed vast irrigation systems consisting of canals, reservoirs, levees, and distribution channels. Satellite surveys and archaeological mapping reveal canal networks extending for hundreds of kilometers. Maintaining such systems required an understanding of gradients, water flow, soil conditions, and labor management. Modern hydraulic engineers note that even small errors in elevation can significantly reduce the efficiency of irrigation systems. Yet these ancient builders achieved large-scale water management without modern surveying instruments, metal machinery, or advanced mathematical tools as we understand them today. However, the most intriguing mystery lies not in their cities or canals, but in their mathematics. Among all ancient technological achievements, the Sumerian mathematical system remains one of the most puzzling. Most civilizations naturally developed counting systems based on 10, reflecting the number of fingers on human hands. The Sumerians took a different path. They adopted a base 60 numerical system known today as the sexagesimal system. More than 5,000 years later, humanity still lives with this ancient decision. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle because of mathematical traditions that can be traced back to Mesopotamia. The question is why? Base 60 is mathematically elegant because it can be divided evenly by many numbers, including 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This makes fractions and calculations easier than in many other numbering systems. Yet recognizing these advantages requires a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of numerical relationships. Archaeologists have discovered clay tablets showing multiplication tables, division exercises, geometric calculations, and algebra-like problem solving. Some tablets dating to nearly 4,000 years ago demonstrate mathematical reasoning that would not become common in many other societies until much later. One famous example is the tablet known as Plimpton 322. Dating to approximately 1800 BCE, it contains numerical patterns that many researchers interpret as related to right triangles and what are now called Pythagorean triples. Although debate continues regarding its exact purpose, the tablet demonstrates an advanced understanding of mathematical relationships centuries before the lifetime traditionally associated with Pythagoras. The existence of such knowledge raises profound questions about how mathematical concepts developed in the ancient world and whether earlier stages of this intellectual evolution remain undiscovered beneath the sands of Mesopotamia. The sophistication of Sumerian mathematics becomes even more impressive when viewed alongside their administrative systems. Hundreds of thousands of clay tablets have been recovered from archaeological sites throughout Mesopotamia. These records track taxes, agricultural production, trade transactions, labor assignments, property ownership, and religious offerings. Managing such enormous quantities of information required standardized numerical systems and reliable methods of calculation. Some historians describe Sumerian bureaucracy as humanity's first large-scale information processing network. Long before computers, the Sumerians had effectively created a data management system capable of organizing entire cities and kingdoms. Their achievements extended into astronomy as well. Ancient Mesopotamian observers carefully recorded celestial movements for centuries. By monitoring the moon, planets, and seasonal cycles, they developed increasingly accurate calendars. Later, Babylonian astronomers inherited and expanded this tradition, but many of its foundations likely originated with earlier Sumerian observations. Some scholars argue that the mathematical structure of the base 60 system may have been linked to astronomical calculations. The number 360, for example, closely approximates the number of days in a year recognized by some ancient calendars. Whether this connection was intentional remains uncertain, but it highlights the remarkable integration of mathematics, administration, and astronomy within Sumerian society. Another technological mystery can be seen in the construction of ziggurats. These massive step temple complexes dominated the skylines of major cities. The Great Ziggurat of Ur originally stood more than 30 meters high and required millions of mud bricks. Building structures of this scale in a region with frequent flooding and limited stone resources posed immense engineering challenges. Excavations have revealed sophisticated drainage systems layered construction techniques, and the use of natural bitumen for waterproofing. Many sections survived for thousands of years despite being built primarily from sun-dried mud brick, a material generally considered vulnerable to erosion. Modern researchers continue to study how Sumerian builders optimized materials and construction methods to achieve such durability. The mystery deepens when examining Sumerian written traditions. The Sumerian king list describes rulers who supposedly reigned for tens of thousands of years before a great flood transformed the world. Some kings are said to have ruled for 28,800 years, 36,000 years, or even longer. While these figures are clearly not literal human lifespans, scholars remain divided on their meaning. Were they symbolic numbers, astronomical cycles, religious concepts expressed mathematically, or remnants of older traditions whose original significance has been lost? What makes the document especially intriguing is that its later sections begin aligning with rulers and events that can be verified archaeologically, blurring the boundary between myth and history. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all concerns the origins of the Sumerians themselves. Their language does not belong to any known major language family and remains a linguistic isolate. Unlike Indo-European, Semitic, or Sino-Tibetan languages, Sumerian appears to stand alone. This has led to decades of speculation regarding where the Sumerians came from and how their culture developed. Archaeological evidence suggests gradual regional development rather than the arrival of a lost super-civilization, yet significant gaps remain. By the time written history begins, the Sumerians already possessed advanced systems of mathematics, engineering, administration, and urban planning. What do you think is the most fascinating mystery of the Sumerians? Was their advanced knowledge the result of thousands of years of lost development? Or is there still a missing piece of history waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Late Bronze Age collapse is one of the greatest mysteries in human history. Stretching across the eastern Mediterranean, from Greece and Anatolia to Egypt, the Levant, and Mesopotamia, it was not the destruction of a single kingdom, but the sudden collapse of an entire interconnected world. Around 1200 BC, some of the most advanced civilizations on Earth began to disappear within just a few generations. Cities burned, palaces were abandoned, trade routes vanished, writing systems fell silent, and technologies that had taken centuries to develop seemed to dissolve almost overnight. What makes this event so extraordinary is that it happened during an age that many historians now compare to an ancient version of globalization. The question is not simply why these civilizations collapsed. The real mystery is how a world so technologically sophisticated could unravel so completely. The discovery of this catastrophe did not come from a single archaeological excavation. During the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists working across Greece, Turkey, Syria, Israel, and Egypt repeatedly uncovered the same pattern. Prosperous cities showed evidence of destruction within a relatively narrow time frame. At first, these events appeared unrelated, but as more sites were excavated and radiocarbon dating improved, a startling picture emerged. Entire civilizations had experienced a dramatic breakdown between approximately 1200 and 1150 BC. It was one of the largest systemic collapses ever documented in the ancient world. Before examining the mystery itself, it is important to understand how advanced the Late Bronze Age really was. Popular imagination often portrays this era as primitive, but archaeological evidence tells a very different story. By the 13th century BC, the Eastern Mediterranean was connected through vast commercial networks spanning thousands of kilometers. Diplomatic letters traveled between kings, merchant ships crossed open seas carrying cargoes worth fortunes. Engineers constructed massive fortifications, palaces, harbors, and irrigation systems. Governments maintained administrative records using complex writing systems. In many respects, this was one of the most technologically interconnected societies humanity had ever created. One of the most remarkable discoveries illustrating this sophistication is the Uluburun shipwreck, found off the coast of modern Turkey. Dated to approximately 1300 BC, the vessel carried over 10 tons of copper ingots, roughly 1 ton of tin, glass ingots, ivory, ebony, jewelry, and luxury goods originating from multiple regions. Scientific analysis suggests that materials aboard the ship came from Cyprus, Egypt, the Levant, Mesopotamia, and possibly even farther away. This single vessel demonstrates that Bronze Age trade networks stretched across an enormous geographic area. Yet hidden within its cargo lies perhaps the greatest technological mystery of the entire collapse. Bronze was the foundation of civilization. Weapons, tools, armor, agricultural equipment, and countless other products depended upon it. Producing bronze required a mixture of copper and tin. Copper was relatively abundant. Tin was not. In fact, tin was one of the rarest strategic resources in the ancient world. Most Bronze Age civilizations possessed little or no local supply. Yet year after year, century after century, vast quantities of tin somehow arrived exactly where they were needed. The mystery deepens when researchers attempt to identify the source. Unlike copper mines, many ancient tin sources remain uncertain. Some evidence points towards Central Asia. Other studies suggest deposits in Afghanistan. Isotopic analysis has connected certain artifacts to regions thousands of kilometers from where they were ultimately discovered. Even more surprising, some researchers have proposed that a portion of Bronze Age tin may have originated in Cornwall in southwestern Britain, over 4,000 kilometers away from major Mediterranean centers. If this hypothesis is correct, then ancient traders maintained supply chains stretching farther than many historians once believed possible. This raises a question that remains unanswered even today. Who coordinated these networks? There was no global empire. There were no modern maps, no compasses, no banks, and no centralized international institutions. Yet somehow, merchants, sailors, miners, and rulers sustained one of the most complex resource distribution systems of the ancient world. The movement of tin resembles a logistical miracle. Thousands of tons appear to have traveled across mountains, deserts, rivers, and seas with remarkable consistency. Then, almost suddenly, the system failed. Archaeological evidence suggests that after the collapse, tin became dramatically less common throughout many regions. Bronze production declined. Long-distance trade shrank. Some scholars argue that the interruption of tin supply may have triggered cascading failures throughout the entire Mediterranean economy. Imagine a modern world suddenly losing access to semiconductors, oil, or electricity. Entire industries would grind to a halt. In many ways, tin may have been the Bronze Age equivalent of a critical technological resource upon which everything depended. The disappearance of technological knowledge is equally puzzling. Following the collapse, many sophisticated administrative systems vanished. In Mycenaean Greece, the Linear B writing system disappeared entirely. Monumental palace construction ceased. Trade networks fragmented. Population levels declined in numerous regions. Some communities returned to smaller, less complex forms of organization. Historians often refer to the centuries following the collapse as a dark age, not because people vanished, but because much knowledge appears to have been lost. What makes this especially strange is that technological knowledge does not usually disappear so completely. The Egyptians knew how to build monumental architecture. The Hittites mastered advanced metallurgy. The Mycenaeans operated highly organized bureaucracies. Yet after the collapse, many of these achievements became rare or disappeared altogether. Archaeologists continue debating whether this represents actual technological regression or merely the loss of centralized institutions capable of preserving and transmitting expertise. Adding another layer of mystery are the enigmatic sea peoples. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions describe large groups arriving by sea and attacking multiple regions across the Mediterranean. Reliefs from the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III depict fierce battles against these invaders around 1177 BC. However, despite more than a century of research, scholars still cannot definitively identify who the sea peoples were. They may have been migrants fleeing famine, they may have been displaced populations driven by environmental pressures, they may have been mercenaries, raiders, or entire communities seeking new lands. The evidence remains frustratingly incomplete. The sea peoples are particularly intriguing because they appear precisely when the wider system was already under stress. Their attacks may have accelerated existing weaknesses rather than caused the collapse outright. In this sense, they resemble a final shock striking a structure that was already unstable. Yet because their origins remain uncertain, they continue to occupy one of the most mysterious positions in ancient history. Climate evidence has introduced another possible explanation. Sediment cores, pollen records, cave formations, and tree ring studies indicate that parts of the eastern Mediterranean experienced severe droughts around the time of the collapse. Some regions may have endured decades of reduced rainfall. Agricultural production likely suffered. Food shortages could have triggered migration, unrest, and conflict. However, climate data does not provide a complete answer. Some areas show stronger evidence of drought than others. The timing is not perfectly consistent everywhere. Environmental stress appears important, but it does not fully explain why entire political and technological systems failed simultaneously. Modern researchers increasingly view the Late Bronze Age collapse as a failure of complexity itself. The interconnected world of 1200 BC may have become so dependent upon long-distance trade, specialized labor, resource imports, and political stability that even small disruptions could trigger catastrophic consequences. Computer models of complex systems demonstrate that highly interconnected networks often become vulnerable to cascading failures. When one critical component collapses, others follow. The Bronze Age world may represent the earliest known example of such a phenomenon on a continental scale. One of the most striking aspects of the Late Bronze Age collapse is that major civilizations seemed unprepared. Despite their power and advanced systems, the Egyptians, Hittites, and Mycenaeans failed to recognize how fragile their interconnected world had become. Within a few decades, cities were abandoned, trade collapsed, and valuable knowledge was lost. What do you think was the single most important factor behind the Late Bronze Age collapse? Climate change, war, economic breakdown, the loss of critical resources like tin or something else entirely? Share your theory in the comments below. Across the rolling hills of central Italy, between the Arno and Tiber rivers, a remarkable civilization emerged more than 2,800 years ago, with engineering expertise, advanced metalworking techniques, and urban planning skills that appeared far ahead of their time. Long before Rome rose to imperial power, the Etruscans were constructing stone cities, draining marshlands, carving roads through solid rock, and creating finely crafted metal artifacts whose sophistication continues to impress historians and archaeologists today. The modern rediscovery of the Etruscans happened gradually rather than through a single dramatic excavation. During the Renaissance, unusual tombs filled with painted walls and luxury artifacts began appearing beneath Italian farmland. By the 18th and 19th centuries, systematic excavations at sites such as Tarquinia, Serviteri, Veii, and Vulci revealed an entire lost civilization. Archaeologists uncovered thousands of tombs, bronze statues, jewelry, inscriptions, roads, and city walls. Yet despite more than 2 centuries of research, one fundamental question remains unanswered. Who exactly were the Etruscans, and how did they acquire technological knowledge that often appears unexpectedly advanced for its time? The mystery begins with their language. More than 13,000 Etruscan inscriptions have been discovered. Scholars can read the letters because the alphabet is related to Greek writing, yet most of the language itself remains only partially understood. This creates an unusual situation in archaeology. Researchers can pronounce many words but often cannot fully understand what they mean. Entire sections of Etruscan knowledge may therefore remain hidden in texts that survive physically but remain intellectually inaccessible. It is as if a technical manual from an advanced society existed, but nobody could completely translate it. Among the most remarkable achievements of the Etruscans was their ability to transform landscapes through hydraulic engineering. Large areas of central Italy consisted of marshes, flood-prone valleys, and difficult terrain. Archaeological evidence shows that Etruscan engineers constructed extensive drainage networks, artificial channels, reservoirs, and underground tunnels to manage water. Some tunnels were excavated through volcanic rock and extended for hundreds of meters. Even more impressive, several were dug from opposite directions and met with astonishing accuracy in the middle. Modern engineers accomplish similar tasks using surveying instruments, laser measurements, GPS systems, and detailed mapping. The Etruscans possessed none of these technologies, yet many of their hydraulic works continued functioning for centuries. Some systems later became foundations for Roman infrastructure, suggesting that Rome inherited engineering knowledge rather than inventing it independently. Yet no Etruscan achievement generates more fascination than their extraordinary mastery of metalworking. The civilization controlled rich mineral deposits throughout central Italy, particularly on Elba Island, where vast iron ore reserves supplied ancient industries. Archaeological studies estimate that thousands of tons of ore were extracted and processed during the height of Etruscan power between the 7th and 5th centuries BCE. Ancient slag deposits found across Tuscany indicate large-scale industrial production unprecedented in much of contemporary Europe. The scale alone is impressive, but the true mystery lies in the quality of their work. Etruscan craftsmen produced weapons, armor, mirrors, ceremonial objects, sculptures, and jewelry, displaying levels of precision that challenge assumptions about ancient technology. Metallurgical analysis has revealed carefully controlled alloy compositions, suggesting detailed practical knowledge of temperatures, ore selection, and material behavior. Some bronze artifacts contain highly consistent mixtures of copper and tin, while certain iron objects display properties indicating sophisticated forging techniques. Perhaps the most astonishing examples are their gold ornaments. Etruscan jewelers perfected a process known as granulation, in which microscopic gold spheres are attached to a surface to create intricate decorative patterns. Many surviving pieces contain thousands of tiny gold beads, some measuring less than 0.2 millimeters in diameter. Under magnification, these decorations appear almost machine-made. The precision rivals work produced by highly specialized craftsmen using modern tools. The mystery is not simply that the Etruscans created such objects, the mystery is how they created them. Modern researchers have spent decades attempting to reconstruct the granulation process. Experimental archaeologists can reproduce similar results today, but often only with carefully controlled laboratory conditions, magnification equipment, and modern metallurgical knowledge. Ancient craftsmen achieved comparable outcomes more than 2,500 years ago. Even more puzzling, many Etruscan gold artifacts show little evidence of conventional soldering. Traditional methods would leave traces indicating where separate components were joined together. In numerous cases, those traces are either extremely subtle or entirely absent. Some researchers propose that the Etruscans employed advanced diffusion bonding techniques involving organic compounds and precise heating conditions. Others argue that lost chemical processes may have been used. No consensus exists. The exact procedures that allowed Etruscan artisans to attach thousands of microscopic gold spheres remain one of the most enduring technological mysteries of the ancient Mediterranean. The sophistication of Etruscan metallurgy becomes even more striking when compared with neighbouring cultures. During the same period, many European societies were still transitioning between Bronze Age and Iron Age technologies, yet Etruscan workshops were already producing luxury metalwork traded throughout the Mediterranean. Their products have been found hundreds of kilometres from their homeland, demonstrating participation in extensive commercial networks linking Italy with Greece, Phoenicia, North Africa, and beyond. Such trade required not only craftsmanship but also advanced systems of resource extraction, transportation, and economic organization. Their engineering abilities extended beyond metal. Massive stone walls surrounding Etruscan cities were constructed, using blocks weighing several tons. Some gateways employed true arches long before Roman architecture popularized them across Europe. Structures such as the famous gates of Perugia and Volterra demonstrate an understanding of load distribution that would influence later Roman construction. The question is not whether the Romans improved these techniques, they undoubtedly did, but how much of Rome's architectural success originated with the civilization it eventually absorbed. Underground architecture presents another mystery. At sites such as Cerveteri, entire necropolises were carved into rock, creating underground cities for the dead. Streets, chambers, doorways, columns, benches, and architectural details were sculpted directly from stone. Thousands of tons of material had to be removed with remarkable precision. Yet few records explain the tools, planning methods, or labour systems required to complete projects on such a scale. Astronomy may also have played a role in Etruscan engineering. Several cities, temples, and sacred spaces appear aligned with celestial events. Certain structures correspond to solar positions during significant times of the year. Similar alignments are known from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. But the mathematical methods used by Etruscan planners remain uncertain because so much of their written knowledge remains undeciphered. The Etruscans didn't vanish suddenly. Between the 4th and 1st centuries BCE, they were gradually absorbed by the growing Roman Republic. Their language and independence disappeared, but their influence remained. Roman engineering, urban planning, religion, and architecture were all shaped by Etruscan knowledge. Proto-Elamite is one of the most mysterious technological achievements of the ancient world, emerging suddenly across the plains of southwestern Iran around 3200 BC and disappearing only a few centuries later, leaving behind thousands of clay tablets that modern scholars still cannot fully read. Centered around the ancient city of Susa, one of the earliest urban centers in human history, Proto-Elamite does not captivate researchers because of giant monuments, lost temples, or buried treasures. Its mystery lies in something far more unsettling: evidence that one of humanity's earliest civilizations developed a sophisticated system of information management, accounting, and written communication that remains largely undeciphered more than 5,000 years later. The story began in the late 19th century when French archaeological teams excavating Susa uncovered large numbers of clay tablets covered with unfamiliar symbols. At first, Many researchers assumed they represented an early version of the Mesopotamian cuneiform. However, closer examination revealed that the symbols belonged to an entirely different writing system. Over the following decades, excavations at Susa and other sites across Iran produced more than 1,600 Proto-Elamite tablets. Instead of solving the mystery, each new discovery deepened it. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were deciphered through the Rosetta Stone, or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which could be compared across multiple languages, Proto-Elamite provided no bilingual inscription, no translation key, and no surviving descendant language capable of unlocking its meaning. What makes this discovery particularly shocking is its age. The Proto-Elamite tablets were created at roughly the same time as the earliest known administrative records from Mesopotamia. Yet, despite sharing a similar historical period, Proto-Elamite developed its own visual symbols, numerical systems, and administrative conventions. In some respects, it appears less like a regional variation of Mesopotamian writing and more like an independent experiment in the invention of information technology. The greatest mystery revolves around the writing system itself. More than a century after its discovery, scholars still cannot fully decipher it. Researchers have identified approximately 1,000 distinct signs, although many occur only rarely. They can recognize numerical symbols and certain accounting patterns, but the underlying language remains unknown. This creates a remarkable situation. Archaeologists possess thousands of records created by real people describing real events, transactions, and administrative activities, yet most of those records remain effectively silent. The challenge is far greater than simply translating an ancient language. The fundamental problem is that nobody knows exactly what Proto-Elamite was designed to record. Some scholars believe it encoded spoken language. Others argue that many tablets functioned primarily as accounting documents, recording quantities rather than sentences. In modern terms, the tablets may resemble spreadsheets more than books. Imagine finding a warehouse full of computer databases from a lost civilization while having no idea how their software operated. That is essentially the situation researchers face today. The numerical systems found within Proto-Elamite tablets are among the most sophisticated aspects of the mystery. Unlike modern societies that generally rely on a single numerical framework, Proto-Elamite administrators employed multiple counting systems simultaneously. Different numerical conventions appear to have been used for livestock, grain, labor, land, and manufactured goods. This complexity rivals some of the administrative practices seen in much later civilizations. Researchers comparing the tablets have discovered evidence of highly structured record keeping, suggesting that specialized officials maintained large quantities of economic information. Some tablets contain dozens or even hundreds of entries arranged in orderly rows and columns. The layout is so systematic that modern scholars often compare them to accounting ledgers. Information appears grouped according to categories, totals, and subcategories. In several cases, mathematical relationships between entries indicate that calculations were performed according to consistent rules. Such organizational sophistication raises an uncomfortable question. How could one of humanity's earliest urban societies develop a bureaucratic system capable of managing complex economic data at such a scale? The mystery becomes even more intriguing when considering standardization. Proto-Elamite tablets have been discovered at sites separated by hundreds of kilometers, yet many symbols remained remarkably consistent across vast distances. This suggests the existence of trained scribes operating under shared conventions. In Mesopotamia, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of scribal schools where students practiced writing signs on clay tablets. For Proto-Elamite, equivalent institutions remain largely invisible. The writing system appears standardized enough to imply formal training, yet direct evidence for such educational infrastructure is scarce. Another unanswered question concerns the speed with which the system emerged. Most writing traditions evolve gradually through identifiable stages. Proto-Elamite, however, appears in the archaeological record already possessing complex administrative capabilities. While researchers recognize influences from earlier accounting technologies such as clay tokens and numerical tablets, the transition from simple accounting methods to a fully developed Proto-Elamite system seems surprisingly rapid. Some scholars compare this phenomenon to suddenly discovering a modern accounting department without evidence of its earlier development. The relationship between Proto-Elamite and neighboring Mesopotamian civilizations remains equally mysterious. During the late 4th millennium BC, trade networks connected regions stretching from the Persian Gulf to Anatolia and Central Asia. Archaeological evidence indicates exchanges of raw materials, manufactured goods, and technological knowledge. Yet, Proto-Elamite communities chose to maintain a distinct administrative identity. Their writing system borrowed certain concepts from Mesopotamia while preserving its own unique structure. Why these societies adopted parallel but separate systems of information management remains unclear. Modern technology has transformed the investigation. High-resolution imaging, three-dimensional scanning, and artificial intelligence now allow researchers to analyze tablets in unprecedented detail. Digital projects have created searchable databases containing thousands of signs. Machine learning algorithms can identify recurring patterns, compare sign sequences, and detect statistical relationships invisible to human observers. In some cases, computers have successfully reconstructed damaged symbols or identified previously unnoticed connections between tablets. Yet despite these advances, the central mystery remains unsolved. Artificial intelligence can recognize patterns, but patterns alone cannot reveal meaning without understanding the language behind them. The situation is often compared to the decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Before the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, hieroglyphs appeared equally mysterious. Once scholars obtained a bilingual reference, centuries of confusion collapsed within decades. Proto-Elamite lacks such a breakthrough. Researchers possess the data but not the key. As a result, every tablet functions like a locked archive from humanity's earliest experiments with organized information. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of the Proto-Elamite mystery is not that the system remains undeciphered, but that it vanished. Around 2900 BC, Proto-Elamite writing largely disappeared from the archaeological record. There is no clear evidence of catastrophic destruction, continent-wide collapse, or sudden depopulation. The administrative system simply ceased to be used. Later Elamite civilizations developed different forms of writing, but the original Proto-Elamite script was abandoned. Entire generations of accumulated knowledge may have been lost in the process. More than 5,000 years later, the message is still waiting to be read. What do you think these ancient symbols were trying to tell us? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Centered on the island of Crete in the eastern Mediterranean, the Minoan civilization flourished during the Bronze Age between approximately 3000 and 1450 BCE, centuries before the rise of classical Greece. When archaeologists began uncovering its ruins, they discovered evidence of engineering, architecture, material science, and artistic technologies that appeared remarkably advanced for their era. Even more puzzling, many of the secrets behind these achievements remain inaccessible because the Minoans left behind a script known as Linear A that has never been deciphered. What survives today is the legacy of a highly sophisticated society whose scientific knowledge has largely been lost to history. The modern story of the Minoans began in 1900 when British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans started excavating the massive palace complex at Knossos on Crete. What he expected to find was a relatively ordinary Bronze Age settlement. Instead, he uncovered a sprawling architectural complex covering more than 20,000 square meters, complete with multi-story buildings, advanced drainage systems, storage facilities, ceremonial spaces, and vibrant frescoes. At the time, many historians believed that complex European civilization began primarily with classical Greece. The discoveries at Knossos pushed organized urban society in the region back by more than 1,000 years and revealed an advanced civilization that had largely been forgotten. One of the first mysteries involved water management. The Palace of Knossos contained an extensive network of terracotta pipes, drainage channels, and wastewater systems. Some pipes were designed with tapered joints that increased water pressure and reduced leakage. Engineers studying the system found that many channels were built with carefully calculated gradients, allowing water to flow efficiently through gravity alone. Similar concepts would not become common in many European cities until thousands of years later. The question that continues to fascinate researchers is how Bronze Age builders achieved such hydraulic precision without modern surveying instruments. The Minoans left no surviving technical manuals, making it impossible to know whether this knowledge was based on mathematical principles, generations of experimentation, or a combination of both. Another technological puzzle appears in Minoan architecture itself. Crete lies within a highly active seismic zone where earthquakes have repeatedly struck throughout history. Yet many Minoan structures display characteristics that modern engineers identify as surprisingly resilient to seismic activity. Builders often combined stone walls with wooden beams embedded within the structure. The stone provided strength, while the timber introduced flexibility, allowing buildings to absorb movement rather than collapse under stress. This approach resembles concepts used in some modern earthquake-resistant designs. Archaeologists continue debating whether the Minoans consciously developed these techniques through observation of repeated earthquakes, or whether the design evolved gradually through practical experience. Either explanation suggests an impressive understanding of structural behavior long before formal engineering science existed. The mystery deepens when examining Minoan maritime power. Crete possessed few natural advantages compared to large continental kingdoms, yet the Minoans established one of the most influential trade networks in the Bronze Age Mediterranean. Archaeological evidence links them with Egypt, Cyprus, the Levant, Anatolia, and mainland Greece. Copper, tin, ivory, precious stones, and luxury goods travelled through Minoan ports. Some estimates suggest that Minoan influence extended across thousands of kilometers of sea routes. Maintaining such a network required reliable navigation, shipbuilding expertise, weather prediction, and logistical coordination. Yet almost no written explanations survive. Historians know the system existed because artifacts appear across distant regions, but the methods that allowed the Minoans to manage this maritime empire remain largely unknown. The famous Phaistos disc adds another layer to the mystery. Discovered in 1908 at the Palace of Phaistos, the clay disc measures approximately 15 centimeters in diameter and contains 241 symbols arranged in a spiral pattern. Unlike typical inscriptions carved individually by hand, these symbols were impressed using reusable stamps. Some scholars have described the technique as a primitive form of movable type printing more than 3,000 years before Gutenberg. The disc remains undeciphered, and no identical text has ever been found. Because there is only one known example, researchers cannot determine whether it represents a religious document, a legal record, a ritual object, or something entirely different. The technology used to create it suggests a surprisingly advanced approach to information reproduction, yet its purpose remains one of archaeology's greatest unanswered questions. Equally mysterious is the undeciphered script known as Linear A. Thousands of inscriptions have been discovered across Crete and neighbouring islands. Scholars can identify the symbols and understand certain administrative patterns, but the language itself remains unreadable. This creates an extraordinary situation in which researchers possess evidence of a sophisticated civilization, but cannot access most of its written knowledge. Imagine discovering the libraries of an advanced society while lacking the ability to understand a single sentence. The result is that many aspects of Minoan science, engineering, religion, and administration remain hidden behind a linguistic barrier that has survived for more than 3 millennia. Perhaps the most astonishing mystery involves the Minoans' mastery of colour and materials. Among all their technological achievements, this area may reveal the highest level of scientific sophistication. When excavators first uncovered Minoan frescoes at Knossos, Akrotiri, and other sites, they were stunned by the intensity of the colours. Even after more than 3,500 years, many pigments retained remarkable vibrancy. Reds, blues, whites, blacks, and yellows remained visible despite centuries of burial, moisture, earthquakes, and environmental change. For comparison, many modern paints can fade significantly within decades when exposed to sunlight and weather. Scientific analysis has revealed that Minoan artists carefully selected mineral-based pigments. Red often came from iron-rich hematite. Black was produced from carbon materials. White was derived from lime and gypsum. More impressive was the use of Egyptian blue, considered the world's first synthetic pigment. Producing Egyptian blue required heating silica, copper compounds, calcium, and alkali at temperatures approaching 850 to 1000 degrees Celsius. Such manufacturing demanded controlled firing conditions and precise proportions. The presence of this pigment demonstrates that Minoan craftsmen either mastered the production process themselves or maintained access to highly specialized technological knowledge through international trade networks. The application techniques were equally sophisticated. Many frescoes were painted onto wet plaster, allowing pigments to chemically bond with the wall surface as the plaster cured. This method dramatically improved durability. Microscopic studies have shown evidence of multiple plaster layers, careful surface preparation, and complex painting sequences. The level of planning resembles techniques later associated with some of the finest fresco traditions in history. Researchers continue to debate how artisans were trained and how such technical standards were maintained across generations. Material science extended beyond pigments. Minoan builders demonstrated remarkable expertise in gypsum, limestone, and engineered plaster. Some palace floors remained smooth and durable despite centuries of heavy use. Certain plaster formulations display resistance to moisture and cracking that surprises modern conservation specialists. Experimental archaeology has attempted to recreate some of these materials, yet exact replication remains difficult because the original recipes were never recorded. Variations in mineral composition, firing temperatures, and mixing techniques may have contributed to properties that are still not fully understood. The Minoans also displayed unusual skill in metalworking. Bronze artifacts recovered from Crete often show consistent alloy compositions, despite the island's limited natural metal resources. Producing bronze required copper and tin, materials that frequently originated from distant regions. Maintaining reliable alloy quality over centuries implies sophisticated trade management and metallurgical knowledge. Ancient craftsmen controlled furnace temperatures without thermometers, standardized production without modern measurement systems, and manufactured tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects with impressive precision. The organizational structure behind this achievement remains largely invisible because the written records that might explain it cannot yet be read. Among the most remarkable prehistoric societies ever discovered, the Cucuteni Tripilia culture flourished across what is now Romania, Moldova and Ukraine between roughly 5,500 and 2750 BCE. Long before the pyramids of Egypt reached their greatest scale and thousands of years before the rise of classical civilizations such as Greece and Rome, these people created enormous settlements, sophisticated architecture, and some of the most advanced ceramics of the prehistoric world. Yet despite more than a century of archaeological research, many aspects of their technological achievements remain difficult to explain. The greatest mystery is not what they built, but how a society that lacked writing, centralized states and large-scale metal industries managed to achieve such remarkable levels of organization and craftsmanship. The modern story of the Cucuteni civilization began in 1884 when Romanian archaeologist Teodor Burada discovered unusual pottery fragments near the village of Cucuteni in northeastern Romania. Decades later, additional excavations across Moldova and Ukraine revealed that these artifacts belong to a vast cultural network covering more than 350,000 square kilometers. What initially appeared to be isolated farming communities gradually emerged as one of the largest and most complex Neolithic cultures ever identified in Europe. The real shock came much later. During the late 20th century, aerial surveys, geomagnetic mapping, and satellite-based investigations revealed something archaeologists had never expected to find in a prehistoric farming culture. Beneath fields in central Ukraine were the remains of enormous settlements now known as megasites. Locations such as Talyanki, Maidanetske, and Dobrovody covered between 250 and 450 hectares. Some estimates suggest populations ranging from 10,000 to 15,000 inhabitants, while a few models propose numbers approaching 20,000. To understand how extraordinary this is, one must compare these settlements with other societies of the same era. Around 4000 BCE, many communities across Europe consisted of only a few dozen households. Even some of the earliest urban centers of Mesopotamia would not reach comparable scales until centuries later. Yet, somehow, the people of Cucuteni Tripilia gathered thousands of individuals into organized settlements without evidence for kings, palaces, armies, or bureaucratic administrations. The layout of these settlements presents another puzzle. Archaeological surveys reveal houses arranged in concentric circles extending outward from large central open spaces. In some cases, more than 2,000 structures were organized into remarkably consistent geometric patterns. Modern researchers can easily recognize these layouts through computer-generated maps, but the question remains, how were they designed in the first place? There is no evidence that the inhabitants possessed written plans, advanced surveying instruments, or mathematical systems comparable to those used by later civilizations. Nevertheless, entire communities appear to have followed a common architectural vision across areas covering hundreds of hectares. Some scholars suspect the existence of standardized measurement systems that have left no direct trace in the archaeological record. Yet among all Cucuteni mysteries, nothing fascinates researchers more than their ceramics. The pottery produced by this culture is often regarded as some of the finest ever created during the Neolithic period. Even today, museum visitors are frequently surprised to learn that these vessels were manufactured thousands of years before the invention of the potter's wheel became widespread in Europe. The surfaces of bowls, jars, and ritual vessels are covered with complex spirals, flowing curves, nested geometric motifs, and intricate painted patterns that display extraordinary symmetry. At first glance, these decorations appear artistic. Under closer examination, however, they reveal a technological mystery. Producing such precision consistently across a territory spanning hundreds of thousands of square kilometers required a degree of technical control rarely associated with Stone Age societies. Many vessels feature nearly identical proportions, balanced compositions, and carefully repeated motifs. Experimental archaeologists attempting to recreate these objects have discovered that achieving the same visual consistency demands extensive experience and precise control over materials and firing conditions. Scientific analysis has shown that Cucuteni potters carefully selected specific clay mixtures, often removing impurities before shaping their vessels. Mineralogical studies indicate that firing temperatures commonly reach between 800 and 1000 degrees Celsius. For comparison, many earlier Neolithic cultures typically operated at lower and less stable temperatures. Maintaining such conditions is difficult even with modern reconstructions of ancient kilns. Temperature fluctuations can cause cracking, warping, or color inconsistencies. Yet thousands of Cucuteni vessels display remarkably uniform results. Even more intriguing is their mastery of color technology. The characteristic red, black, and white palette found on many Cucuteni ceramics required a sophisticated understanding of chemical transformations during firing. The final colors depended not only on pigments, but also on oxygen levels inside the kiln. Modern ceramic engineers understand how oxidation and reduction atmospheres influence mineral reactions, but it remains unclear how prehistoric potters acquired enough practical knowledge to control these processes so effectively. No written manuals existed. No technical diagram survived. Nevertheless, generations of artisans repeatedly produced ceramics with predictable outcomes. Researchers have also been puzzled by the apparent simplicity of the kilns themselves. Excavated firing structures are relatively modest compared with the technological sophistication of the finished products. This creates an apparent contradiction. How could simple installations generate such reliable results? Some specialists suggest that the true expertise was not embedded in the kiln design, but in operational techniques passed down through oral traditions. If so, an enormous body of practical engineering knowledge vanished without leaving direct evidence behind. The scale of ceramic production presents another challenge. Thousands upon thousands of vessels have been recovered from Cucuteni sites. Such quantities imply specialized production systems and extensive knowledge transfer across large regions. Yet unlike later civilizations, there's little evidence for centralized workshops controlling standards. Somehow, communities separated by hundreds of kilometers maintained remarkably similar artistic and technical traditions over centuries. The mechanism behind this cultural consistency remains poorly understood. Architecture provides additional evidence of unexpected technological sophistication. Excavations reveal that many Cucuteni houses were not simple huts, but substantial structures with wooden frames, clay walls, elevated floors, and sometimes second stories. Reconstructions suggest heights exceeding 6 meters in certain cases. Building multi-level structures requires an understanding of load distribution and structural stability. Although prehistoric builders certainly relied on experience rather than formal engineering equations, their success indicates practical knowledge accumulated over generations. One of the strangest mysteries involves fire. Archaeologists have discovered that many Cucuteni settlements were intentionally burned. In some locations, temperatures appear to have exceeded 1000 degrees Celsius, transforming clay walls into hardened ceramic-like material. The phenomenon is so widespread that it cannot easily be dismissed as accidental destruction. Some researchers argue that houses were deliberately burned as part of ritual practices. Others propose social or symbolic explanations linked to community renewal. Regardless of the motive, generating such temperatures repeatedly would have required large quantities of fuel and careful management of combustion processes. Once again, the evidence points toward technological capabilities that seem surprisingly advanced for the period. Trade networks further complicate the picture. Raw materials found at Cucuteni sites often originated hundreds of kilometers away. Flint, copper, salt, and specialized clays moved through extensive exchange systems connecting distant communities. Such networks suggest sophisticated logistical organization despite the apparent absence of centralized political authority. How these systems functioned across such vast territory remains one of the most debated questions in European prehistory. One of the greatest mysteries of the Cucuteni Tripilia culture is that it displayed many features of a civilization without the institutions usually associated with one. There were no palaces, monumental temples, dynastic rulers, or written records, yet large populations organized construction, maintained trade networks, and developed impressive technologies and artistic traditions. Bryncelli DDU is a 5,000-year-old monument standing on the island of Anglesey in northwest Wales. A stone chamber hidden beneath an earthen mound that appears simple at first glance, yet contains one of the most perplexing engineering mysteries of prehistoric Europe. Unlike Egypt's pyramids or the massive circles of Stonehenge, Bryncelli DDU is not famous because of its size. Its mystery comes from precision. Built around 3,2900 BC, during the Neolithic period, the monument demonstrates astronomical knowledge, structural planning, and symbolic design that seems surprisingly advanced for a society that possessed neither metal tools nor writing. Even after more than a century of archaeological investigation, researchers still debate whether the builders were creating a tomb, an observatory, a ritual machine, or something that combined all three functions into a single architectural system. The modern story of Bryncelli DDU began in the late 19th century when antiquarians started documenting ancient monuments across Anglesey. Systematic excavations followed during the 1920s under archaeologist W.J. Hemp. Beneath collapsed stones and accumulated soil, investigators uncovered a carefully constructed passage leading into a central chamber, evidence of earlier ceremonial structures beneath the mound, and one discovery that would become the site's greatest enigma: a solitary standing stone positioned inside the burial chamber itself. The structure appeared to belong to a wider tradition of Atlantic European passage tombs, yet several features distinguished it from almost every comparable monument known in Britain. The first mystery concerns astronomical precision. Every year during the summer solstice, sunlight enters the narrow passage and penetrates deep into the central chamber. The alignment resembles the famous winter solstice illumination of Newgrange in Ireland, yet Bryncelli DDU is smaller and in some ways more difficult to explain. To achieve this effect, Neolithic builders needed to determine the exact position of the rising sun on the longest day of the year and orient the passage accordingly. Modern measurements indicate that the alignment deviates only slightly from the solstitial sunrise position. This level of accuracy implies generations of systematic observation. The builders would have needed to track seasonal changes, monitor horizon markers, and preserve observations over decades. Unlike modern astronomers, they had no optical instruments, mathematical notation, or written records, yet somehow they created an architectural device capable of marking one of the most important events in the solar calendar with remarkable reliability. What makes this achievement more puzzling is that Bryncelli DDU is not an isolated example. Similar solar alignments appear at Newgrange in Ireland, Maeshowe in Orkney, and several other Neolithic monuments across northwestern Europe. The distances separating these sites range from hundreds to more than 1,000 kilometers. This raises a question that archaeology still struggles to answer. Were these communities independently developing the same astronomical knowledge, or did a network of ideas connect distant populations across the Atlantic seaways? Evidence suggests extensive maritime movement during the Neolithic period, but the mechanisms through which precise astronomical knowledge could have spread remain largely invisible. Yet the greatest mystery of Bryn Celli DDDU is not the sunlight. It is the stone standing silently in the centre of the chamber. Known today as the Pillar Stone, it remains one of the most unusual architectural elements ever discovered inside a British passage tomb. Unlike supporting columns in later architecture, the stone appears unnecessary for structural stability. The roof could function without it. Unlike burial markers, it occupies a position that seems deliberately integrated into the chamber's design. Archaeologists have debated its purpose for decades, and no explanation has gained universal acceptance. One possibility is that the pillar stone served as a ceremonial focus. In this interpretation, the chamber functioned as a sacred theatre in which sunlight, darkness, stone, and ritual interacted. During the summer solstice sunrise, the incoming beam may have illuminated the stone directly or created shifting patterns around it. Such an effect could have transformed the chamber into a symbolic representation of cosmic renewal. The problem is that no surviving evidence confirms this interpretation. No written records exist. No clear iconography explains its role. The stone remains silent. Another possibility is that the pillar stone functioned as a form of prehistoric astronomical instrument. Researchers have noted that its placement appears too deliberate to be random. If observers track the interaction between sunlight and the stone across different seasons, the monument could have served as a sophisticated calendar. Agricultural societies depended on seasonal prediction. Knowing when to plant, harvest, or conduct communal ceremonies carried enormous practical importance. The chamber may therefore have operated not merely as a tomb, but as a mechanism for encoding and transmitting time itself. Yet proving such a function is extraordinarily difficult, because the original appearance of the monument has changed over 5 millennia. The mystery deepens when one considers the stone's origins. Geological analysis suggests that some materials used in the monument were transported from locations beyond the immediate construction area. Moving multi-ton stones without wheeled vehicles, draft animals, or metal equipment required substantial labour organisation. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that wooden rollers, sledges, ropes, and coordinated human effort can move large stones, but reproducing isolated movements is not the same as reconstructing an entire construction project. Bryn Celli DDU required planning, transportation, excavation, alignment, and assembly. Every stage demanded knowledge that was never written down and has largely vanished from history. Adding further complexity, excavations revealed that the monument visible today was not the site's original structure. Before the passage tomb existed, the location contained a circular ceremonial enclosure surrounded by a ditch and associated with standing stones. At some point, this earlier monument was deliberately dismantled. One standing stone was buried. Parts of the ceremonial landscape were destroyed. Then, an entirely new structure was built over the same sacred location. Archaeologists often compare this sequence to rebuilding a cathedral directly atop an older temple. The decision implies that the site possessed enduring significance across generations. Somehow, knowledge of its importance survived long enough to motivate an extensive architectural transformation. Among the most intriguing discoveries was a decorated stone bearing serpentine and spiral patterns. Similar motifs appear throughout Atlantic Europe, particularly in Ireland's Great Passage tombs. Spirals are among the oldest symbolic designs known to humanity. Some researchers interpret them as representations of solar cycles, seasonal change, or cosmological beliefs. Others argue that they functioned as markers of cultural identity. The challenge is that symbols rarely leave straightforward explanations. The same pattern may have carried multiple meanings simultaneously. What remains undeniable is that communities separated by sea and distance were sharing artistic concepts on a scale once thought impossible for Neolithic societies. Engineering questions remain unresolved. The 8.4-metre passage is aligned with remarkable precision, allowing sunlight to reach the chamber thousands of years after construction. Builders had to account for direction, elevation, and the local horizon, where even small errors could have disrupted the effect. Without modern instruments, achieving such accuracy likely required years of careful observation and experience. The monument's acoustics add another layer of mystery. Studies of similar passage tombs show that enclosed stone chambers can amplify low-frequency sounds and create resonance. Brincelli di Didiu may have been designed with sound in mind, making the chamber a multi-sensory space that shaped human experience through both light and acoustics. Wemyss Caves is a place where an entire lost language may have been carved into stone. Cut into the sandstone cliffs of the Fife Coast in eastern Scotland, overlooking the Firth of Forth, these sea caves contain one of the largest concentrations of ancient Pictish carvings ever discovered. More than 8,000 individual markings have been documented across the cave system, ranging from mysterious symbols and human figures to animals, ships, crosses, and inscriptions spanning over 1,000 years of history. Yet despite decades of archaeological investigation, the greatest mystery of Wemyss Caves is not what the carvings depict. It is how the people who created them achieved such remarkable geometric precision, symmetry, and durability in one of the harshest coastal environments in northern Europe. The caves were never truly lost. Local communities had known about them for centuries. However, their archaeological importance began attracting serious attention during the 19th century, when antiquarians recorded unusual carvings on the cave walls. Systematic surveys throughout the 20th century revealed that Wemyss contained the highest concentration of Pictish cave carvings known anywhere in Britain. Modern laser scanning and digital recording projects conducted during the 21st century dramatically expanded the catalogue of known symbols, uncovering details that had become almost invisible to the human eye through centuries of erosion. The Picts themselves remain one of the most enigmatic peoples in European history. Occupying much of northern and eastern Scotland during the late Iron Age and early medieval period, they left behind impressive symbol stones, fortified settlements, metalwork, and monumental architecture. Yet unlike the Romans, Greeks, or Anglo-Saxons, they left almost no written records that can explain their beliefs, social structures, or symbolic systems. As a result, every Pictish carving discovered today becomes a fragment of a puzzle that scholars still cannot fully reconstruct. The first mystery begins with the environment itself. Wemyss Caves sit directly beside the North Sea. The sandstone cliffs are constantly exposed to salt spray, moisture, temperature fluctuations, and powerful coastal storms. Modern geological studies demonstrate that sandstone in such environments experiences continual granular disintegration. Individual mineral grains gradually loosen and detach from the rock surface. Over centuries, even deep carvings can become distorted beyond recognition. Yet, many of the Pictish symbols at Wemyss remain surprisingly identifiable despite having been exposed to these conditions for well over a millennium. This preservation creates a technological question. Did the carvers deliberately select specific rock surfaces that were more resistant to weathering? Geological surveys show that sandstone layers within the caves vary considerably in hardness, grain size, and cementation. Some sections deteriorate rapidly while others remain relatively stable. Several of the most important carvings appear to occupy precisely those areas where erosion has been slower. If this pattern is intentional rather than accidental, it suggests practical geological knowledge rarely associated with early medieval societies. Even more intriguing is the extraordinary precision of the carvings themselves. Among the most famous symbols found at Wemyss are the double disc, the crescent and V-rod, and the mirror symbols. At first glance, these designs appear simple. However, closer analysis reveals levels of geometric control that continue to surprise researchers. Many of the symbols display balanced proportions, carefully controlled curves, and symmetrical relationships that remain consistent despite being carved into uneven natural rock surfaces. The double disc symbol provides one of the most striking examples. Two circles of nearly identical diameter are connected by a decorated bar. Reproducing such a design freehand on rough sandstone would be difficult even for a skilled modern artist. Yet multiple examples throughout Pictish Scotland exhibit remarkably similar proportions. This consistency raises a fundamental question. How were these shapes planned? No measuring tools associated with Pictish carving have ever been discovered. There is no archaeological evidence for specialized compasses, drafting instruments, or geometric templates. Nevertheless, digital analysis of surviving carvings suggests that many symbols deviate only slightly from ideal geometric forms. Some researchers have proposed the use of chords, wooden guides, or simple proportional systems. Others suggest experienced artisans may have learned standardized construction methods through generations of apprenticeship. The problem is that no direct evidence survives to confirm any of these theories. The challenge becomes even greater when one considers the physical conditions under which the carvings were created. Unlike the smooth marble surfaces used by Greek sculptors or the prepared limestone blocks used by Egyptian artisans, the walls of Wemyss caves are naturally irregular. Cracks, ridges, and varying textures distort visual perception. Achieving balanced symmetry on such surfaces requires not only artistic skill, but also advanced spatial judgment. Modern experimental archaeology has demonstrated that reproducing some Pictish symbols on uneven stone often requires repeated measurement and correction. Yet the original carvings show surprisingly few signs of major adjustments. Comparisons with other ancient symbolic traditions make the mystery even more remarkable. Scandinavian rock carvings from the Bronze Age frequently emphasize figures and scenes, but rarely demonstrate the same degree of abstract geometric standardization. Celtic art developed complex curvilinear patterns, yet many examples date centuries later than the earliest Pictish symbols. Roman military inscriptions exhibit precision because they relied upon established engineering traditions and written standards. The Picts appear to have achieved comparable consistency without leaving behind any equivalent technical documentation. The possibility that these symbols formed part of a larger information system introduces another layer of complexity. More than 40 recurring symbol types are known across Pictish Scotland. Many appear in repeated combinations. Certain pairings occur so consistently that some scholars believe they may represent names, lineages, territorial markers, or administrative identities. Statistical studies have shown that the symbols do not occur randomly. Their distribution resembles structured communication systems more closely than decorative art. If the symbols functioned as information carriers, precision suddenly becomes far more important. A slight variation in shape could alter meaning, much as changing a letter can alter a word. This possibility may explain why geometric consistency appears across sites separated by hundreds of kilometers. Wemyss caves may therefore preserve evidence not merely of artistic expression, but of a symbolic language whose rules remain unknown. Another mystery involves the decision to place these carvings inside caves rather than on exposed standing stones. Throughout Scotland, Pictish symbols commonly appear on monumental stones, erected in visible public locations. Wemyss presents a different pattern. Here, many carvings are hidden within dark coastal chambers, accessible only through narrow entrances. Such locations seem poorly suited for public communication. One explanation suggests ritual use. Across many ancient cultures, caves were viewed as liminal spaces positioned between worlds. Archaeological examples range from Paleolithic painted caves in France and Spain to sacred caverns in the Mediterranean. The acoustics of Wemyss strengthen this possibility. Several caves produce unusual resonance effects when waves strike the entrances. Sound reflections can amplify low frequencies and create prolonged echoes. Modern acoustic measurements indicate that certain chambers naturally generate reverberation patterns capable of altering human perception of space. If the Picts deliberately selected caves with distinctive acoustic properties, they may have understood environmental effects that modern researchers are only beginning to quantify. Similar discussions have emerged regarding prehistoric monuments such as Stonehenge, Newgrange, and several megalithic tombs where acoustics appear unusually significant. While no direct evidence proves intentional acoustic engineering at Wemyss, the correlation remains difficult to ignore. The carvings also reveal evidence of long-term cultural continuity. Some caves contain artwork spanning multiple centuries. Early Pictish symbols coexist with later Christian crosses, medieval inscriptions, and post-medieval markings. This suggests that specific caves retained importance across generations, despite major political and religious changes. Maintaining such continuity would have required transmission of cultural knowledge over long periods. Yet the mechanisms by which that knowledge survived remain largely invisible in the archaeological record. Tinkinswood Chambered Tomb is a monument that seems impossible for the people who built it. Standing in the countryside of the Vale of Glamorgan in southern Wales, this Neolithic tomb has survived for more than 5,000 years. Archaeologists know when it was constructed. They know what it was used for. They can measure every stone, calculate every angle, and estimate every weight. Yet one fundamental question remains unanswered. How did a farming society with no metal tools, no wheels, and no written language create a structure capable of moving and supporting one of the largest prehistoric capstones in Britain? The deeper researchers investigate Tinkinswood, the more it challenges traditional assumptions about the technological abilities of Europe's earliest builders. The modern story of Tinkinswood began in 1914 when archaeologist John Ward conducted one of the first major excavations of the monument. Located approximately 10 kilometres west of Cardiff, the site sits on a limestone ridge overlooking fertile lowlands that would have supported Neolithic farming communities around 3600 BCE. Excavations revealed a long burial chamber hidden beneath what was once an earthen mound nearly 40 metres long. Human remains, pottery fragments, and stone tools were recovered from the site. Analysis suggested that the tomb had been used repeatedly over many centuries. Yet what immediately captured attention was not the burial evidence. It was the enormous stone roof covering the chamber. The capstone of Tinkinswood measures approximately 7.3 metres in length and weighs an estimated 40 tonnes. Some calculations place the weight even higher depending on the density of the local limestone. To understand the scale of this achievement, Consider that the average African elephant weighs around 6 tons. The capstone therefore weighs roughly the equivalent of 6 or 7 adult elephants balanced above a narrow stone chamber. It remains one of the largest surviving capstones in Britain and among the heaviest ever used in a Neolithic monument in Western Europe. The first mystery concerns transportation. Geological studies indicate that the stones likely originated from local outcrops, but local does not necessarily mean nearby. Even moving a 40-ton block a few hundred meters across uneven terrain presents an enormous engineering challenge. Modern engineers can estimate the forces involved. On wooden rollers, a stone of this size could require hundreds of people pulling simultaneously. On a sled dragged across prepared ground, friction alone would create tremendous resistance. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that prehistoric communities could move large stones using ropes, timber rollers, earthened ramps, and coordinated labour. However, no experiment has perfectly recreated the transport of a capstone matching the dimensions and weight of Tinkinswood's roof stone. The exact method remains unknown. The challenge becomes even greater when considering elevation. Transporting a 40-ton stone is one problem. Raising it into position is another entirely. The capstone sits atop upright stones forming the burial chamber. To achieve this, builders may have gradually increased the height of an earthen ramp, dragging the stone upward before removing the supporting soil. Similar theories have been proposed for megalithic monuments across Europe. Yet every reconstruction faces difficulties. A ramp large enough to lift a 40-ton stone would require moving vast quantities of earth. Such a project demands planning, labour organisation and engineering foresight on a scale rarely associated with small Neolithic communities. Perhaps even more remarkable than the construction itself is the monument's structural stability. For more than 5 millennia, the capstone has remained largely intact despite exposure to weather, temperature fluctuations, biological growth and ground movement. Engineers studying megalithic structures often note that longevity depends on effective load distribution. At Tinkinswood, the weight of the roof stone is transferred through carefully positioned supporting slabs. The builders may not have understood structural mechanics in mathematical terms, but they clearly possessed practical knowledge acquired through observation and experience. The result is a monument that has outlasted kingdoms, empires, and entire civilizations. Comparison with other Neolithic monuments highlights the unusual nature of Tinkinswood. At Stonehenge, many of the largest stones weigh between 20 and 30 tons. Several of Tinkinswood's components approach or exceed this range, despite being constructed centuries earlier. Across Atlantic Europe, chambered tombs are common, yet few possess a single capstone of comparable size. Newgrange in Ireland, Maeshoa in Scotland, and Gavrinis in France demonstrate extraordinary prehistoric engineering. But Tinkinswood remains distinctive because so much of the structure's weight is concentrated in one enormous stone. Another mystery concerns surveying and alignment. The tomb was not assembled randomly. The chamber follows a deliberate orientation, and the surrounding mound was constructed according to a coherent architectural plan. Achieving such precision without modern measuring devices required sophisticated observational techniques. Archaeologists have proposed that Neolithic builders used ropes, wooden stakes, sighting poles, and geometric methods derived from repeated practice. While simple in theory, these techniques can produce surprisingly accurate results when applied by skilled builders. The problem is that no direct evidence survives showing exactly how Tinkinswood's designers measured distances, maintained symmetry, or ensured stability during construction. The burial evidence introduces another layer of mystery. Excavations revealed remains representing at least 50 individuals, but estimates suggest that as many as 800 or even 1,000 people may have been interred at the site over centuries of use. This raises important questions about social organization. A monument of this scale requires cooperation among large groups of people. The construction alone may have involved hundreds of workers. Maintaining the site for generations implies the existence of traditions, leadership structures, and systems of knowledge transmission capable of preserving architectural practices across many lifetimes. Researchers have also investigated the acoustic properties of chambered tombs. Studies conducted at several Neolithic monuments have shown that enclosed stone chambers can create unusual resonance effects. Low-frequency sounds, chanting and drumming may be amplified within confined spaces. Although detailed acoustic testing at Tinkinswood remains limited compared with sites such as Newgrange, the possibility raises intriguing questions. Did the builders intentionally exploit sound during ceremonies? Were architectural decisions influenced not only by structural requirements, but also by ritual experiences created within the chamber? Definitive answers remain elusive. The technological puzzle deepens when considering the tools available to the builders. Around 3600 BCE, metalworking had not yet become widespread in Britain. Construction depended primarily on stone tools, wooden implements, antler picks, ropes made from plant fibers, and human labor. Yet the finished monument demonstrates levels of planning and execution that appear remarkably advanced. This does not mean the builders possessed lost technologies or unknown machines. Rather, it suggests that modern observers may underestimate the capabilities of prehistoric engineering traditions developed over countless generations. Located in the Linfen Basin of Shanxi Province along the middle reaches of the Yellow River, Taoxi stands as a remarkable window into the early development of Chinese civilization. First identified during archaeological surveys in the 1950s, the site's true significance did not emerge until large-scale excavations began in 1978. What researchers uncovered challenged long-held assumptions about the origins of complex society in ancient China. Beneath layers of earth lay the remains of a vast urban centre dating from approximately 2300 to 1900 BC, a city that flourished nearly 4,000 years ago during the late Longshan period. At its height, Taoxi covered more than 280 hectares, emerging at roughly the same time Egypt was constructing the last great pyramids of the Old Kingdom and centuries before the rise of the Shang dynasty. Yet the most intriguing aspect of Taoxi is not its age, but the extraordinary level of scientific knowledge, engineering skill, and social organization revealed by its ruins. The first clues appeared in the city's layout. Excavations revealed enormous rammed earth walls enclosing different sectors of the settlement. Archaeologists identified elite residential districts, ceremonial zones, workshops, storage facilities, and large cemeteries. Such planning suggests a degree of social organization far beyond that of a simple farming village. Constructing these walls alone would have required moving and compacting hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of soil. Modern engineering studies show that properly compacted rammed earth can achieve compressive strengths exceeding several megapascals, but maintaining such consistency across kilometers of fortifications requires careful control of moisture, material composition, and labor coordination. The mystery is how a society without known writing systems manage construction projects on such a scale. Researchers estimate that thousands of workers would have been required to build and maintain the city's defensive and ceremonial infrastructure. Organizing labor forces of this magnitude normally depends upon administrative systems capable of tracking resources, schedules, and personnel. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets perform this function. In Egypt, hieroglyphic records documented state projects. At Tausig, however, no equivalent archive has been discovered. The city displays evidence of large-scale administration, yet the mechanism that enabled such administration remains largely invisible. It is as though the organizational knowledge existed but left almost no trace. The most famous discovery at Tausig intensified this mystery dramatically. In the early 2000s, archaeologists uncovered a remarkable structure interpreted as an astronomical observatory. The installation consisted of a semicircular rammed earth platform associated with a series of carefully positioned observation points. Computer simulations later demonstrated that sunlight would rise through specific gaps at different times of the year, including dates near the solstices. The alignment was not random. The geometry appears deliberately designed to track the annual movement of the sun. This finding stunned researchers because precise solar observation requires long-term data collection. The apparent position of sunrise shifts continuously throughout the year. To identify the exact locations of solstice sunrises, observers must monitor the horizon repeatedly over multiple annual cycles. Even small observational errors accumulate rapidly. Modern archaeoastronomers studying the Tausig structure concluded that its builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of seasonal solar patterns. Such knowledge would have been essential for agriculture, ritual calendars, and political authority. The engineering challenge becomes even more impressive when compared with other ancient astronomical monuments. Stonehenge in Britain, whose major construction phases occurred between roughly 3000 and 2000 BC, is famous for its solar alignments. The observatory at Tausig belongs to a similar era, yet developed independently thousands of kilometers away. Both sites demonstrate a surprisingly advanced capacity to translate astronomical observations into permanent architecture. The question is how such knowledge emerged and how it was preserved in societies lacking extensive written documentation. The precision of the observatory raises additional technical puzzles. Researchers analyzing the alignment geometry discovered that the observation corridors correspond closely to significant solar positions. Achieving this level of accuracy requires more than casual observation. Builders needed methods for establishing stable reference points, measuring angles, and maintaining construction precision over multiple stages of development. No measuring instruments have survived. No instruction manuals exist. Yet the finished structure functions as a large-scale astronomical device. Evidence of advanced technical capability appears elsewhere across the site. Excavations uncovered workshops associated with pottery production, jade working, and other specialized crafts. Some artifacts display remarkable standardization. Standardization is one of the clearest indicators of technical systems because it implies quality control, measurement protocols, and shared production knowledge. When numerous objects produced by different individuals conform to similar dimensions and proportions, archaeologists infer the existence of established manufacturing traditions. At Tausig, such traditions appear surprisingly mature. Particularly intriguing are the musical instruments discovered in elite burials. Among the most famous are crocodile skin drums and sets of stone chimes. Acoustic analysis suggests that many of these instruments were carefully tuned. Producing consistent musical intervals requires a practical understanding of resonance, vibration, and material properties. Modern instrument makers rely on precise measurements and repeated calibration. Ancient Tausig craftsmen achieved comparable functional results using technologies that remain poorly understood. The existence of standardized ceremonial music implies both technical expertise and sophisticated cultural institutions capable of transmitting that expertise. The cemeteries provide another layer of mystery. More than 1,000 burials have been excavated, revealing extraordinary social inequality. Elite tombs contain hundreds of grave goods, including jade artifacts, ceramics, musical instruments, and prestige items. Ordinary graves often contain very few objects. Statistical analyses show differences in wealth distribution far greater than those observed in many earlier Neolithic communities. Such disparities suggest the emergence of powerful ruling classes. Some archaeologists have proposed that Taosi may represent one of China's earliest state-level societies. Others argue that it was a complex chiefdom rather than a true state. Regardless of terminology, the site demonstrates a level of hierarchy that required mechanisms of governance, taxation, labor mobilization, and ideological control. Yet the technological infrastructure supporting these systems remains elusive. How were resources collected? How were agricultural surpluses distributed? How were construction projects coordinated? The archaeological evidence reveals the outcomes, but not the processes. Perhaps the most controversial mystery concerns connections between Taosi and later Chinese civilization. Ancient historical texts describe legendary rulers such as Yao, who supposedly governed during a golden age before the earliest confirmed dynasties. Some scholars have suggested that Taosi may correspond to traditions associated with these semi-mythical accounts. The theory remains debated because direct evidence is limited. Nevertheless, the site's chronology overlaps remarkably well with periods later remembered in Chinese historical memory. If any connection exists, Taosi may preserve fragments of events that eventually evolved into legend. Environmental studies add another dimension to the puzzle. Geological and climatic data indicate that northern China experienced significant environmental fluctuations during the late 3rd millennium BC. Variations in rainfall could have affected agricultural productivity throughout the Yellow River region. Some researchers believe climatic stress contributed to social instability at Taosi. Others emphasize evidence of political conflict. Taosi's final phase shows signs of destruction, social unrest, and major change. Archaeologists found abandoned elite areas, altered defences, and shifts in burial practices, suggesting the collapse of the existing social order. The cause remains unclear and may have involved conflict, environmental stress, economic problems, or a combination of factors. This collapse remains one of Taosi's greatest mysteries. Despite its advanced engineering, astronomy, and social organization, the civilization eventually fragmented, leaving only limited clues about what truly happened. Standing on the western coast of Anglesey in North Wales and overlooking the Irish Sea, Barclodiad y Gowres appears at first glance to be just another Neolithic passage tomb. However, beneath its reconstructed mound lies evidence of engineering, astronomy, mathematics, and symbolic knowledge that continues to puzzle archaeologists today. Built between approximately 3000 and 2500 BC, during the same era that saw the construction of Stonehenge and the Great Passage tombs of Ireland, the monument presents a remarkable mystery. How did communities without writing, metal tools, or advanced technology create a structure whose architectural precision and possible astronomical sophistication still inspire debate among modern researchers? Although local people had known about the monument for centuries, its true significance emerged only after systematic excavations conducted in 1952 and 1953 by Welsh archaeologist Terence G. E. Powell. What the excavation team uncovered was far more remarkable than expected. Beneath a damaged mound, they discovered a cruciform chamber tomb containing decorated stones, human remains, traces of cremations, and evidence of repeated ritual activity. The most shocking discovery was a collection of intricately carved stones covered with spirals, zigzags, lozenges, and geometric motifs. At the time, such elaborate rock art was almost unknown in Wales. Researchers immediately noticed striking similarities between these carvings and those found hundreds of kilometres away in the Great Irish Passage tombs of Newgrange and Knowth. The discovery suggested that communities separated by the Irish Sea may have shared ideas, beliefs, and technical knowledge more than 5,000 years ago. The decorated stones remain one of the site's greatest mysteries. Archaeologists can identify the carving techniques, but explaining how Neolithic craftsmen produced such complex geometric compositions is far more difficult. The engravings were carved into hard stone using tools made primarily from stone itself. Unlike modern artisans, these builders possessed neither iron chisels nor steel instruments. Yet many of the patterns display remarkable symmetry and consistency. Some lines intersect at carefully controlled angles, while repeating motifs appear to follow intentional geometric rules. Similar artistic traditions appear across the Irish Sea, suggesting the existence of a shared symbolic system. Whether these carvings represented religious concepts, astronomical information, territorial markers, or a form of proto-symbolic communication remains unknown. The absence of writing means their meaning has been effectively lost for more than 5 millennia. The engineering required to construct the monument presents another unresolved puzzle. Several structural stones weigh multiple tons. Moving such stones across uneven terrain would have required coordination, planning, and labour on a significant scale. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that large stones can be transported using wooden rollers, sledges, ropes, and human labour alone. Yet, recreating the process highlights the immense logistical challenge involved. Unlike later societies, the builders of Barclodiad y Gowres had no wheeled vehicles and no metal equipment. Nevertheless, the stones were positioned with enough precision to support a stable chamber that has endured for thousands of years. The structure survived harsh Atlantic weather, powerful coastal winds, and centuries of erosion. Modern engineers can explain the physical principles involved, but the organizational systems that enabled such construction remain largely invisible in the archaeological record. Equally intriguing is the evidence for acoustic design. Researchers studying prehistoric monuments have increasingly recognized that sound may have played an important role in ritual architecture. Barclodiad y Gowres contains narrow passages and enclosed chambers capable of producing unusual acoustic effects. Experimental measurements indicate that low-frequency sounds can resonate within confined stone spaces, amplifying voices and creating prolonged echoes. Similar acoustic phenomena have been documented at Newgrange in Ireland and at several megalithic structures throughout Atlantic Europe. Whether the builders intentionally designed the monument to manipulate sound cannot be proven, yet the possibility raises important questions. If ritual specialists understood how architecture could alter human perception through acoustics, they may have possessed practical knowledge accumulated through generations of observation and experimentation. The most fascinating mystery, however, involves astronomy. Among all the unresolved questions surrounding Barclodiad y Gowres, its possible astronomical alignment remains one of the most technically complex. Archaeologists and archaeoastronomers have long observed that many Neolithic monuments appear connected to celestial events. Newgrange is famously aligned with the winter solstice sunrise, while Maeshowe in Orkney captures the setting sun during the same period. Barclodiad y Gowres appears to belong to this broader tradition. Studies conducted during the late 20th and early 21st centuries suggested that the passage and chamber may have been intentionally oriented towards significant solar positions on the horizon. What makes this possibility extraordinary is the level of observational accuracy required. Determining solar alignments is not a simple matter. The position of sunrise changes continuously throughout the year. Near the latitude of Anglesey, the sunrise point migrates across a large section of the horizon between winter and summer solstices. To identify a meaningful astronomical target, observers would need to record solar positions repeatedly over many years. They would have to distinguish random observations from recurring patterns and then translate those patterns into architecture. This process effectively requires long-term data collection, even if no written records exist. Modern calculations show that a difference of only a few degrees can significantly alter whether sunlight enters a chamber during a specific astronomical event. Yet, many Neolithic monuments achieve alignments accurate enough to suggest intentional planning, rather than coincidence. At Newgrange, sunlight penetrates deep into the burial chamber during the winter solstice. At Noath, alignments correspond closely with equinoctial events. Although Barclodiad y Gaures is less precisely preserved than those monuments, evidence suggests its builders were equally concerned with horizon observations and solar cycles. Some researchers have proposed that the monument's orientation may have connected ritual activities to seasonal transitions, helping communities track agricultural calendars and ceremonial events. The technical implications are profound. 5,000 years ago, the builders possessed no telescopes, no compasses, and no mathematical notation. Nevertheless, they may have achieved architectural alignments comparable to those observed at some of Europe's most sophisticated prehistoric monuments. This raises an uncomfortable question for modern assumptions about Neolithic societies. Were these communities merely simple farmers, or did they possess highly developed observational sciences transmitted orally across generations? The evidence increasingly favors the latter possibility. Comparisons with other monuments strengthen this interpretation. Newgrange, approximately 150 kilometres away across the Irish Sea, demonstrates clear astronomical planning. Noath contains hundreds of decorated stones and possible solar alignments. Maeshowe in Orkney exhibits remarkable geometric precision. Barclodiad y Gaures shares characteristics with all three. The similarities suggest that knowledge was not isolated within individual communities but circulated through extensive maritime networks. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neolithic populations regularly cross stretches of open water that many historians once assumed were major barriers. Ideas, symbols, construction methods, and perhaps astronomical knowledge may have travelled alongside people and goods. Jarlshof is a windswept archaeological settlement standing on the southern tip of mainland Shetland, Scotland, where the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean collide. Few places on Earth preserve such an extraordinary record of human occupation. Within a single site, archaeologists have uncovered evidence spanning more than 4,000 years, from the Late Bronze Age around 1200 BC through the Iron Age, the Pictish period, the Viking Age, and into the medieval era. What makes Jarlshof remarkable is not merely its age, but the technological questions hidden within its layers. Across 40 centuries, different societies repeatedly chose the same location, built increasingly sophisticated structures, maintained long-distance trade networks across some of the world's most dangerous seas, and developed engineering solutions that continue to surprise researchers today. The site was discovered almost by accident. During the winter storms of the 1890s, powerful waves eroded part of the coastline near Sunbury Head and exposed buried stone walls beneath the turf. The remains attracted the attention of scholars, and systematic excavations led by archaeologist Alexander Curl between 1925 and 1935 revealed an archaeological sequence unlike anything previously found in Britain. Layer after layer emerged from the ground. Instead of a single settlement, investigators found an entire timeline of human civilization stacked one upon another. Every generation appeared to have inherited the location, modified it, and left behind clues to its technological capabilities. One of the first mysteries concerns the site's astonishing continuity. Most ancient settlements were eventually abandoned because of climate change, resource depletion, warfare, or environmental deterioration. Jarlshof somehow remained attractive for more than 4 millennia. The question is why? Shetland lies at nearly 60 degrees north latitude, making it one of the most challenging inhabited regions in prehistoric Europe. Winters are long, storms are frequent, and agricultural opportunities are limited compared to southern Britain. Yet, generation after generation return to the same coastal position. Modern environmental studies suggest the area provided a rare combination of sheltered landing places, access to fishing grounds, freshwater sources, and relatively productive grazing land. However, many locations across Shetland possess similar advantages. The persistence of Jarlshof hints that ancient communities may have recognized strategic environmental qualities that archaeologists still do not fully understand. The engineering of the settlement itself presents another puzzle. The earliest inhabitants constructed houses partially sunk into the ground, a design that appears simple until examined through modern thermodynamic principles. By embedding structures within the earth and surrounding them with thick stone walls, builders created a passive temperature control system. Soil acts as a thermal buffer, reducing temperature fluctuations throughout the year. Modern energy-efficient architecture uses similar concepts under the name thermal mass design. Temperature simulations suggest that partially subterranean houses can reduce heat loss by as much as 30 to 50% compared with fully exposed structures in harsh northern climates. The people of Jarlshof achieved this thousands of years before the development of formal engineering theory. Researchers continue to debate whether this knowledge emerged through generations of experimentation or through traditions inherited from even earlier populations whose settlements have not survived. The layout of the Iron Age village raises additional questions. Archaeologists uncovered an intricate network of interconnected structures, passages, storage chambers, and built-in stone furniture. Many rooms contain wall recesses, carefully positioned compartments, and symmetrical arrangements that appear too deliberate to be accidental. Some houses seem designed around highly organized domestic activities, suggesting a level of spatial planning far more sophisticated than the stereotypical image of prehistoric communities. Certain architectural patterns repeated across multiple generations despite changes in population and culture. The persistence of these design principles implies the existence of architectural traditions transmitted across centuries, yet no written records survive to explain how such knowledge was preserved. Perhaps the most visually impressive engineering achievement is the Broch. During the Iron Age, the inhabitants constructed a massive circular stone tower now known as the Jarlshof Broch. Although only part of the structure survives, comparisons with better preserved examples indicate it may once have risen more than 10 meters high. Brochs remain among the most enigmatic buildings in northern Europe. Their walls often exceeded 4 meters in thickness and incorporated internal stairways, galleries, and chambers. Unlike Roman buildings, they were constructed without mortar. Instead, thousands of carefully selected stones were fitted together with remarkable precision. Modern structural analyses show that the inward curving profile of Broch walls distributed weight efficiently and enhanced stability against strong winds. The mystery lies in construction logistics. Even a modest Broch required the extraction, transport, and placement of thousands of tons of stone. No evidence exists for cranes, advanced lifting mechanisms, or large draft animals. Yet these towers were built across northern Scotland with extraordinary consistency. How small island communities organise such labour remains only partially understood. Another technological puzzle emerges from the site's water management systems. Shetland receives substantial rainfall throughout the year, and poorly designed settlements quickly become waterlogged. Excavations at UnSolve revealed drainage channels and engineered pathways directing water away from living areas. Some of these features remained functional after centuries of burial. Effective drainage may seem unremarkable today, but in prehistoric environments it represented a crucial survival technology. Similar hydraulic planning is often celebrated in Roman cities or Bronze Age palaces such as Knossos. Finding comparable attention to water control within a remote northern settlement challenges assumptions about the technological capabilities of small-scale societies. Yet the greatest mystery of UnSolve lies not in its architecture but in its metallurgy and trade networks. This is where the site becomes truly extraordinary. For much of prehistory, Shetland occupied what appears on a modern map to be the edge of Europe. From a technological perspective, however, UnSolve may have been connected to a surprisingly vast world. Excavations uncovered ironworking debris, metal tools, evidence of smithing, and imported artifacts originating far beyond the islands themselves. During the Viking Age, the settlement became integrated into maritime networks stretching across the North Atlantic. Objects found at UnSolve reveal connections with Norway, the British mainland, Ireland, and possibly regions even farther south. The technological implications are profound. Iron production is not a simple craft. Creating usable iron requires locating ore, constructing furnaces capable of reaching temperatures above 1,150 degrees Celsius, controlling airflow, managing charcoal supplies, and mastering complex forging techniques. Every stage demands accumulated technical knowledge. Even minor mistakes in furnace design can ruin an entire batch of metal. Archaeological evidence suggests that skilled metal workers operated within the settlement, yet Shetland itself lacked many of the resources associated with major metallurgical centres. This raises a fundamental question. Where did the expertise originate? One possibility is that specialist craftsmen travelled through Viking trade routes, carrying knowledge from Scandinavia and other regions. Another theory proposes that technological skills were transmitted through family lineages over generations. Neither explanation fully accounts for the sophistication observed. Viking maritime routes connected communities separated by hundreds or even thousands of kilometres. Some voyages between Norway and Shetland covered more than 300 kilometres of open ocean. Navigation occurred without compasses, accurate maps, or modern instruments. Nevertheless, these networks transported not only goods but also ideas, technologies, and manufacturing techniques. The scale of this exchange becomes even more impressive when compared with other contemporary societies. During the early medieval period, many inland communities rarely interacted with populations more than a few dozen kilometres away. By contrast, Viking sailors routinely crossed vast stretches of ocean. Archaeological studies estimate that some North Atlantic trade routes connected settlements separated by distances exceeding 1,500 kilometres. Through these connections, innovations in shipbuilding, metallurgy, woodworking, and agriculture could spread rapidly. UnSolve appears to have been part of this knowledge network. The settlement may have functioned not merely as a remote village but as a node in an international system of technological exchange. Olmec civilization was discovered in the humid lowlands of the Gulf Coast of present-day Mexico, primarily at San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes. The first colossal stone heads attracted scholarly attention during the 19th century, but the true scale of the civilization only became clear after systematic excavations in the early 20th century. Archaeologists soon realized they were looking at one of the earliest complex societies in the Americas. flourishing between roughly 1500 and 400 BC. What makes the Olmecs fascinating is not simply their age. It is the enormous gap between the technology they supposedly possessed and the engineering achievements they left behind. More than 3,000 years later, many of those achievements remain difficult to fully explain. The mystery begins with the colossal heads. 17 have been discovered so far, carved from volcanic basalt quarried in the Tuxtla Mountains. Some weigh more than 40 tons and stand over 3 meters tall. Modern calculations suggest that transporting a single stone block of this size across swamps, rivers, and dense tropical forests would have required hundreds of workers. Yet the Olmecs had no known draft animals, no iron tools, and no practical wheeled transport system. The quarries were often located 60 to 100 kilometers from the final construction sites. Experimental archaeology has shown that moving stones of similar weight with ropes and wooden rollers is possible, but the logistical complexity becomes extraordinary when repeated dozens of times. The Great Pyramid of Giza required transporting limestone blocks averaging 2.5 tons. Several Olmec heads exceeded 10 times that weight. The question is not whether the stones could be moved. The mystery is how a society operating more than a millennium before classical Greece consistently managed such projects in a tropical environment where preservation of transport infrastructure is almost non-existent. The engineering puzzle deepens at San Lorenzo. Excavations revealed one of the oldest known hydraulic systems in the Americas. Archaeologists uncovered carefully carved basalt channels designed to direct flowing water beneath ceremonial areas. Some individual stone segments weigh several tons and were fitted together with remarkable precision. Engineers studying the system have noted that the channels maintain gradients capable of controlling water flow over considerable distances. Certain sections appear sophisticated enough to create pressure-fed movement, leading some researchers to suggest that the system may have functioned as more than a simple drainage network. Whether it supplied water, controlled flooding, powered ritual displays, or served symbolic purposes remains debated. What is certain is that constructing such a system required extensive knowledge of hydraulics, surveying and stoneworking centuries before similar technologies became widespread elsewhere in the New World. The stoneworking itself presents another technological mystery. Olmec craftsmen produced thousands of objects from jadeite, one of the hardest materials available to ancient artisans. Jadeite ranks approximately 6.5 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, making it significantly more difficult to carve than limestone or sandstone. Yet, Olmec artists created polished masks, figurines, ceremonial axes, and miniature sculptures displaying extraordinary symmetry and precision. Microscopic analysis reveals evidence of grinding, drilling, and polishing techniques that demanded immense skill. Some perforations are so narrow and consistent that researchers estimate many would have required dozens or even hundreds of hours of continuous abrasion, using quartz, sand, and water. The mystery is not that the objects were made. The mystery is how such high levels of standardization were maintained across generations without surviving evidence of formal measurement systems, technical manuals, or written instructions. Adding to the puzzle is the scale of landscape modification. San Lorenzo itself sits on an elevated plateau that appears heavily altered by human activity. Millions of cubic meters of earth were moved to create artificial terraces, ceremonial zones, and engineered platforms. Modern surveys indicate that large portions of the site were reshaped through coordinated labor efforts. Such projects required planning, resource allocation, and social organization on a scale rarely associated with societies of this period. Comparable earth-moving projects would later appear among civilizations such as the Maya, and the builders of Cahokia, but the Olmecs achieved these feats centuries earlier. The engineering challenge becomes even more remarkable when considering the absence of metal excavation tools. Another unresolved question concerns the extraordinary precision with which many Olmec ceremonial centers were oriented. Archaeological surveys reveal recurring alignments approximately 8 degrees west of true north. This orientation appears repeatedly across multiple sites separated by significant distances. The consistency suggests intentional planning rather than coincidence. Some researchers argue that the alignments may reflect observations of solar events, specific stars, or celestial cycles visible during the 2nd millennium BC. Others believe the orientation served symbolic or cosmological functions. Whatever the explanation, the repeated use of nearly identical alignments implies a level of astronomical observation and surveying capability that remains only partially understood. Perhaps even more intriguing are the massive buried offerings discovered beneath ceremonial plazas. At La Venta, archaeologists uncovered elaborate mosaics composed of hundreds of carefully arranged serpentine blocks. These geometric designs required tremendous labor to create, yet they were deliberately buried shortly after completion. Unlike monumental sculptures intended for public display, these constructions were hidden from view. The effort invested in creating artworks that were never meant to be seen raises profound questions about Olmec belief systems and the role of engineering in ritual practice. Some mosaics contain more than 400 precisely positioned stone blocks. Maintaining symmetry across such large hidden compositions would have required careful planning and measurement, but the methods used remain unknown. The Olmecs also possessed surprisingly extensive trade networks. Jadeite used in elite artifacts originated primarily from the Motagua Valley of present-day Guatemala, more than 500 kilometers from major Olmec centers. Obsidian, magnetite, serpentine, and other materials traveled similar distances. Maintaining exchange systems across such vast regions required communication, transportation, and political relationships extending far beyond local communities. Archaeological evidence suggests that Olmec influence spread across much of Mesoamerica, yet the mechanisms that sustained these networks remain poorly understood. No roads comparable to those of later empires have been identified, and many routes likely passed through difficult terrain including mountains, rivers, and tropical forests. One of the most controversial technological mysteries involves magnetism. Researchers have discovered polished magnetite artifacts that exhibit natural magnetic properties. Experiments have demonstrated that certain Olmec objects could potentially function as rudimentary directional indicators. If the Olmecs intentionally exploited magnetic phenomena, they may have been among the earliest societies in the world to recognize practical applications of magnetism. The evidence remains debated, but the possibility is extraordinary. The earliest widely accepted magnetic compasses emerged in China more than a millennium later. While no definitive proof exists that the Olmecs used magnetic navigation, the artifacts continue to challenge assumptions about the limits of ancient scientific knowledge. The colossal heads themselves contain another unresolved mystery. Detailed measurements show that each face is unique. Differences in facial structure, proportions, and headdresses suggest that the sculptures represent specific individuals rather than idealized figures. Producing accurate portraits on stones weighing tens of tons required remarkable artistic control. Some heads were even reworked from earlier monuments, indicating deliberate recycling of massive stone blocks. The engineering calculations involved in reshaping such enormous objects without causing structural fractures remain difficult to reconstruct. By around 400 BC, many major Olmec centers were abandoned or transformed. Archaeologists have found no single cause for this decline. Possible factors include environmental changes, shifting rivers, political instability, and economic disruption. However, none fully explain the disappearance of this advanced civilization. Hidden beneath farmland on the island of mainland Orkney in northern Scotland, Minehow remained unknown to modern archaeology until the year 2000, when a sheep unexpectedly fell into a hole in the ground. What initially appeared to be an ordinary collapse soon led to the discovery of a remarkable underground chamber dating to the Iron Age. Beneath the surface lay a carefully constructed structure connected to a vertical shaft approximately 7 meters deep. Archaeologists quickly realized that Minehow was unlike any ordinary storage pit, burial chamber, or defensive site. More than 2 decades later, despite extensive excavation and scientific investigation, many aspects of its construction, engineering techniques, and original purpose remain a mystery. Excavations revealed a circular subterranean chamber approximately 4.5 meters in diameter, built using sophisticated dry stone masonry. Thousands of sandstone slabs were carefully arranged without mortar, creating walls that have remained stable for nearly 2,000 years. The structure is generally dated to the Iron Age, roughly between the 1st and the 4th centuries AD, although some evidence suggests that activity around the site may have extended across multiple periods. The chamber is accessed through a narrow entrance leading down a steep staircase into the earth. Around the interior walls, archaeologists identified 29 regularly spaced niches cut into the stonework. The purpose of these niches remains one of the site's greatest mysteries. The first question concerns the excavation itself. Modern visitors entering Minehow often underestimate the engineering challenge represented by the structure. The chamber was carved into sandstone bedrock and surrounded by tons of earth and rock. Every cubic meter of material had to be removed manually using Iron Age technology. Unlike Roman mines, where traces of organized extraction systems are often preserved, Minehow contains no obvious evidence of lifting machinery, ramps, or hauling mechanisms. Researchers estimate that dozens of tons of material would have needed to be extracted from the shaft during construction. Yet the builders managed to create a deep underground space while maintaining structural stability throughout the excavation process. The achievement becomes even more impressive when compared with many contemporary Iron Age settlements across Britain, where architecture was largely concentrated above ground in roundhouses and hill forts. Even more remarkable is the geometric precision of the chamber itself. The interior walls form an almost perfectly circular space. Each layer of stone was positioned to distribute weight evenly and resist collapse under the pressure of the overlying earth. Modern engineers recognize that underground chambers are subjected to complex forces. Vertical pressure from soil above combines with lateral pressure, pushing inward from all directions. Small mistakes in stone placement can lead to gradual deformation or catastrophic collapse. Yet, Minehow has survived nearly 2 millennia, despite exposure to moisture, seasonal temperature fluctuations, and geological movement. The precision of the masonry invites comparisons with far more famous structures such as Maeshowe, another Orkney monument dating to around 2800 BC. While Maeshowe belongs to the Neolithic period and Minehow to the Iron Age, both demonstrate an unexpectedly advanced understanding of stone construction and long-term structural durability. The dry stone engineering displayed within Minehow remains difficult to explain fully. Dry stone construction relies entirely on gravity, friction, and precise stone placement rather than mortar. Modern dry stone wall builders undergo extensive training to master these techniques. At Minehow, the walls exhibit a level of consistency suggesting the work of highly skilled specialists rather than ordinary labourers. Individual stones appear selected and shaped, to fit specific positions within the structure. Some archaeologists have suggested that the builders possessed practical knowledge of load distribution developed through generations of experimentation. If true, Minehow may preserve evidence of a sophisticated engineering tradition that has otherwise vanished from the archaeological record. One of the most intriguing features of the chamber is the arrangement of 29 niches built into the walls. Their spacing appears intentional rather than random. Some researchers initially proposed that they held lamps used to illuminate the chamber. However, calculations indicate that far fewer light sources would have been necessary to illuminate such a relatively small space. Others have suggested that wooden beams were inserted into the niches, yet no surviving evidence supports the existence of an overhead platform or secondary floor. The possibility remains that the niches served a ceremonial function. If so, their exact purpose remains unknown. The regularity of their arrangement hints at a design principle that modern researchers have yet to identify. Another unresolved mystery involves ventilation. Underground chambers often face severe air circulation problems. Carbon dioxide accumulates rapidly in enclosed spaces occupied by groups of people. A chamber 7 meters below ground level with a narrow entrance should theoretically suffer from limited airflow. Yet archaeological evidence suggests repeated human use over extended periods. This has led some investigators to speculate that hidden ventilation channels may once have existed. Others propose that now-collapsed passages connected the chamber to additional underground spaces. No definitive evidence has yet been discovered. If Minehow did incorporate a ventilation system, it would represent a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of underground environmental management for the Iron Age. The acoustics of the chamber introduce another layer of mystery. Modern surveys indicate that sounds produced within the circular space are amplified and reflected by the stone walls. Certain frequencies resonate unusually well within the chamber. Experiments conducted by researchers and visitors have demonstrated that voices can carry with remarkable clarity. Some archaeologists have wondered whether the builders intentionally exploited these acoustic properties. Similar discussions have emerged around prehistoric monuments such as Newgrange in Ireland, and certain stone circles in Britain, where unusual sound behaviour has been documented. Although direct evidence is lacking, the possibility that Minehow was designed with acoustic considerations in mind cannot be dismissed. Excavations have also produced puzzling deposits of animal remains. Bones from cattle, sheep, and particularly dogs have been recovered from the site. The concentration of dog remains has attracted considerable attention because dogs occupied important symbolic roles in many ancient societies. In Iron Age Britain, dogs were sometimes associated with protection, healing, and ritual practices. However, no consensus exists regarding the significance of the animal remains at Minehow. They could represent ceremonial offerings, feasting debris, disposal practices, or something entirely different. The evidence remains frustratingly ambiguous. Perhaps the greatest mystery concerns the actual purpose of the structure. Minehow does not fit comfortably into known categories. It lacks the characteristics of a typical dwelling. It shows little evidence of long-term habitation. It differs substantially from grain storage pits, defensive refuges, and burial monuments. Some researchers view it as a ritual centre connected to beliefs about the underworld. Others interpret it as a gathering place for elite groups or religious specialists. A few have proposed that it served multiple functions over time. The problem is that each theory explains certain aspects of the evidence while failing to account for others. Comparisons with other underground structures only deepen the puzzle. Across Scotland and Ireland, archaeologists have documented hundreds of souterrains, subterranean passages often interpreted as storage areas or places of refuge. Most are relatively simple tunnels, Minehao is fundamentally different. Its carefully engineered circular chamber, sophisticated masonry, deep shaft, and unusual internal features suggest a purpose beyond ordinary storage. Some researchers argue that Minehao represents an entirely separate architectural tradition. If so, it may preserve evidence of a specialized form of knowledge now lost to history. Modern technology, including laser scanning and digital modeling, has revealed the chamber's remarkable precision. However, despite these advances, archaeologists still cannot fully explain its purpose, construction methods, or the knowledge behind its design. Liangzhu Ancient City is located in the lower Yangtze River delta of eastern China, near modern-day Hangzhou. At first glance, it appears to be another prehistoric archaeological site buried beneath rice fields and wetlands. Yet beneath that landscape lies one of the greatest technological mysteries of the ancient world. More than 5,000 years ago, long before the rise of the Shang dynasty, before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids reached their peak, and nearly 2 millennia before the first imperial dynasties of China emerged, an unknown society created a vast urban centre supported by massive hydraulic engineering projects, sophisticated city planning, and perhaps the most astonishing jade-working technology ever achieved without metal tools. The modern rediscovery of Liangzhu began in 1936 when archaeologist Shi Xingeng first identified unusual artifacts in the region. For decades, researchers believed they had found only another Neolithic culture. That assumption changed dramatically in the late 20th and early 21st centuries as large-scale excavations revealed an enormous ancient city hidden beneath the landscape. What emerged was not a simple farming settlement, but a complex civilization covering hundreds of square kilometers. In 2007, archaeologists confirmed the existence of a massive city wall system. Even more surprising discoveries followed. By 2015, researchers had identified an extensive network of dams, reservoirs, canals, and water control structures surrounding the city. The scale of these projects immediately raised a disturbing question. How could a society that existed around 3,300 to 2300 BCE possess engineering capabilities that appeared centuries or even millennia ahead of their time? The city itself covered approximately 300 hectares within its inner walls, while the broader urban and ceremonial landscape extended far beyond that. Massive earthen walls enclosed the central area. Some sections stretched for several kilometers and required millions of cubic meters of earth to construct. Modern estimates suggest that the labor investment would have involved tens of thousands of workers over many years. Yet unlike Mesopotamia, Egypt, or later Chinese states, Liangzhu left behind no confirmed writing system capable of recording construction plans, labor quotas, or engineering calculations. The builders somehow coordinated enormous projects without leaving evidence of the administrative tools that most ancient civilizations relied upon. The greatest mystery revolves around water. The Liangzhu people lived in a region vulnerable to seasonal flooding, monsoon rains, and shifting waterways. Instead of merely adapting to the environment, they appear to have reshaped it. Archaeologists have identified a large hydraulic system consisting of dams, levees, reservoirs, and canals spread across more than 100 square kilometers. Some of these dams rank among the oldest large-scale water control structures ever discovered anywhere in the world. Certain reservoirs may have stored millions of cubic meters of water. The engineering challenge was extraordinary. Builders needed to understand terrain gradients, water pressure, seasonal flow patterns, soil stability, and erosion control. Even today, hydraulic engineers rely on mathematical models and surveying instruments to solve such problems. Yet, The Liangzhu civilization accomplished this nearly 5,000 years ago using technologies that remain largely unknown. What makes the discovery even more remarkable is its timing. The hydraulic network of Liangzhu predates many famous engineering achievements elsewhere. The system was already functioning when Stonehenge was still under construction in Britain. It existed before the rise of many major Bronze Age kingdoms. The sophistication of the design suggests not only practical engineering knowledge, but also long-term planning on a regional scale. Researchers have proposed that the reservoirs helped regulate flooding, irrigate crops, facilitate transportation, and support political authority. However, the methods used to design and maintain the network remain one of archaeology's most intriguing unanswered questions. Equally mysterious is the precision with which the city appears to have been organized. Excavations reveal clear spatial planning, including elite ceremonial zones, residential districts, workshops, and defensive structures. The placement of major features often follows consistent orientations and geometric relationships. Yet archaeologists have found no measuring rods, surveying instruments, maps, or written plans. Somehow, the builders achieved remarkable alignment across large distances. Some scholars speculate that they used rope-based measurement systems similar to those later employed in Egypt. Others suggest primitive forms of geometry and land surveying. The evidence, however, remains incomplete. The city demonstrates precision, but the tools that created that precision have vanished. The earthen walls themselves introduce another engineering puzzle. Constructed primarily from compacted earth, these fortifications have survived thousands of years despite exposure to rainfall, flooding, and environmental change. Analysis reveals carefully layered construction techniques, resembling rammed earth methods used by much later civilizations. Individual layers often show consistent thickness and compaction. This indicates systematic quality control during construction. Such standardization would have required organization, supervision, and technical knowledge that many researchers did not expect from a Neolithic society. The walls were not merely piles of dirt. They were engineered structures designed for durability. Yet no aspect of Liangzhu generates more fascination than its jade technology. This is where the civilization begins to look almost impossible. Liangzhu artisans produced thousands of jade objects, many of which rank among the most sophisticated stone carvings ever discovered from the prehistoric world. The most famous are the Kong, square outer tubes containing perfectly circular inner holes, and the Bai discs, polished circular objects associated with ritual activity. At first glance, these artifacts appear beautiful. Under scientific examination, they become astonishing. The primary material was nephrite jade, a mineral with a hardness approaching 6 to 6.5 on the Mohs scale. While not as hard as quartz, nephrite is exceptionally tough because of its interlocking fibrous crystal structure. A modern craftsman often described jade as more difficult to carve than many harder stones because it resists fracturing and cutting. The challenge becomes even greater when considering that Liangzhu craftsmen possessed no iron tools, no steel blades, no powered drills, and no industrial abrasives. Despite these limitations, many Liangzhu jade objects display surfaces polished to extraordinary smoothness. Some feature microscopic incised lines so fine that researchers require magnification to study them properly. Symmetrical patterns repeat with remarkable consistency across different artifacts. Corners appear sharply defined. Cylindrical perforations penetrate thick blocks of jade. Certain Kong objects exhibit geometric precision that would challenge even skilled modern stoneworkers using advanced equipment. Experimental archaeology has attempted to recreate these objects using tools available during the Neolithic period. The results reveal the immense difficulty involved. researchers using bamboo tools, stone implements, abrasive sands, and primitive drilling techniques often require hundreds of hours to reproduce even relatively simple features. Producing a single high-quality ceremonial object could demand months of labor. Yet Liangjiu sites have yielded thousands of such artifacts. This raises a fundamental question. How was production organized on such a scale? One possibility is the existence of highly specialized workshops staffed by full-time artisans whose skills were passed down through generations. Another theory suggests the use of sophisticated abrasive technologies involving quartz, sand, and water. Some researchers believe rotating tubular drills may have accelerated production. Others argue that we still underestimate the technical knowledge possessed by Liangjiu craftsmen. Whatever the answer, the gap between available tools and finished products remains one of the most striking technological puzzles in prehistoric archaeology. The mystery deepens when measurements are compared across multiple artifacts. Many objects appear standardized. Dimensions, proportions, and decorative layouts often follow consistent patterns. Such uniformity implies systems of measurement and quality control. Yet no measuring standards have been discovered. It is as if an entire technological tradition vanished while leaving only its masterpieces behind. India's incredible stepwells are scattered across the arid landscapes of Gujarat and Rajasthan in western India, descending deep beneath the earth like inverted temples hidden in stone. At first glance, they appear to be elaborate wells built to store water. Yet the deeper archaeologists, engineers, and climate scientists investigate them, the more extraordinary they become. Some plunge more than 30 meters below ground, contain thousands of perfectly aligned stone steps, maintain cool temperatures during brutal desert summers, and continue standing after nearly 1,000 years of earthquakes, monsoons, floods, and droughts. What makes them truly mysterious is not simply their beauty, but the sophisticated engineering knowledge they reveal. Knowledge that seems astonishingly advanced for the periods in which they were built. Many of the most famous stepwells were documented during British surveys of India in the 19th century, although local communities had known and used them for centuries. Archaeologists later began detailed studies of sites such as Chand Bauri in Rajasthan, believed to date to around the 8th or 9th century CE, and Rani Ki Vav in Gujarat, constructed during the 11th century under the Solanki dynasty. Excavations at Rani Ki Vav revealed one of the most elaborate underground architectural complexes ever discovered in South Asia. Buried for centuries beneath silt deposited by the Saraswati river system, much of the structure survived in remarkable condition. When researchers began clearing the site, they uncovered hundreds of sculptures, multiple levels of galleries, and evidence of engineering techniques that continue to intrigue specialists today. The most fascinating mystery surrounding the stepwells is not their ability to collect water. It is their apparent mastery of climate control. Modern measurements show that temperatures inside many stepwells can remain between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius cooler than the surrounding environment. During summer months in Rajasthan, surface temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius. Yet visitors descending into Chand Bauri often experience a dramatic drop in temperature long before reaching the water level. In some areas, researchers have measured differences approaching 10 degrees Celsius or more between the upper and lower sections of the structure. To understand why this is remarkable, consider that modern architects spend enormous resources designing passive cooling systems. Computer simulations, airflow modeling, thermal analysis, and climate engineering are routinely used to reduce building temperatures. The builders of the stepwells had none of these technologies, yet many of their structures appear to function as giant underground cooling machines. Their designs exploit several physical principles simultaneously. Massive stone walls absorb heat slowly. Underground chambers remain insulated from direct solar radiation. Water evaporating from lower levels cools surrounding air. Deep vertical shafts encourage natural convection currents, drawing warmer air upward while cooler air remains trapped below. What remains unexplained is how accurately ancient builders understood these effects. There are no surviving engineering manuals describing airflow calculations or thermal modelling, yet the consistent appearance of these cooling properties across numerous stepwells suggests deliberate design rather than coincidence. Some climate researchers have even proposed that stepwells represent one of humanity's earliest large-scale experiments in passive environmental engineering. In an era increasingly concerned with sustainable architecture, scientists continue studying these ancient structures for insights that could reduce energy consumption in modern buildings. The geometry of the stepwells introduces another layer of mystery. Chandbauri contains approximately 3,500 steps arranged across 13 levels in a pattern of extraordinary symmetry. Viewed from above, the structure resembles a gigantic geometric diagram rather than a simple water reservoir. Maintaining such precision over a depth exceeding 20 meters would challenge even modern builders. Small errors at upper levels would become amplified as construction progressed downward. Yet surveys reveal remarkable consistency throughout the structure. Unlike modern engineers, the builders lacked laser surveying equipment, electronic measurement tools, and computer-assisted design software. Every angle, alignment, and stone placement had to be established manually. Archaeologists continue debating how medieval architects achieved such accuracy. Some suggest sophisticated surveying methods involving ropes, weighted plumb lines, astronomical observations, and geometric principles. Others argue that generations of accumulated construction knowledge allowed craftsmen to achieve results that modern observers often underestimate. Regardless of the explanation, the precision remains one of the most impressive examples of pre-modern engineering anywhere in the world. The structural stability of these monuments presents another challenge to conventional assumptions. Excavating a shaft more than 20 or 30 meters deep creates immense pressure on surrounding walls. Soil shifts over time. Groundwater levels fluctuate. Seasonal temperature changes cause expansion and contraction in stone. In modern construction, engineers use extensive geotechnical studies to predict such stresses. Yet many stepwells have survived for centuries with relatively limited structural damage. Some have remained standing longer than many modern concrete structures. Chandbauri has endured roughly 12 centuries. Rani Ki Vav survived burial beneath sediment for hundreds of years before being excavated. The fact that these structures continue to function demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of load distribution, foundation behavior, drainage management, and long-term durability. The builders may not have possessed formal engineering equations, but the results suggest practical mastery of principles that modern engineers still rely upon. Equally impressive is the hydraulic knowledge embedded within the stepwells. Western India experiences highly seasonal rainfall. Much of the annual precipitation arrives during the monsoon season, while extended dry periods dominate the rest of the year. Effective water management therefore became essential for survival. Stepwells acted as both storage reservoirs and groundwater recharge systems. Their designs slowed evaporation, captured runoff, stabilized water supplies, and provided access to underground aquifers. Modern hydrologists increasingly recognize the sophistication of these systems. Unlike dams that rely on a massive infrastructure and constant maintenance, stepwells operated largely through natural processes. Gravity, infiltration, and groundwater dynamics performed much of the work. In many respects, they represented a sustainable technology centuries before the concept of sustainability existed. Some researchers compare their environmental efficiency to modern water conservation systems designed using advanced scientific models. The placement of stepwells raises additional questions. Many were constructed in locations where groundwater remained relatively reliable despite harsh climatic conditions. Today, identifying such sites often requires geological surveys, hydrological mapping, satellite imagery, and drilling data. Ancient builders had none of these resources. How they consistently selected effective locations remains uncertain. Some scholars believe they relied on generations of empirical observation. Others suspect the existence of sophisticated surveying traditions that have since disappeared from the historical record. The artistic elements found within many stepwells add another dimension to the mystery. Rani Ki Vav contains more than 500 major sculptures and over 1,000 smaller decorative carvings. These artworks survived in an environment characterized by moisture, mineral deposits, fluctuating temperatures, and periodic flooding. Under such conditions, stone erosion normally accelerates significantly, yet many carvings remain remarkably detailed after nearly 1,000 years. Scientists continue studying the stone composition, carving techniques, and weathering patterns to understand their longevity. Some evidence suggests that ancient craftsmen possessed a sophisticated understanding of stone selection and durability. The combination of artistic excellence and engineering functionality is so seamless that stepwells often appear more like underground palaces than practical water infrastructure. Perhaps the greatest mystery is how the knowledge behind these structures disappeared. As centralized water systems spread and stepwells fell into neglect, the traditional techniques used to build them gradually vanished. Much of this expertise was never fully preserved in surviving records. Hidden within the dry river valleys of Peru's central coast, about 180 kilometers north of modern Lima, archaeologists uncovered evidence of one of the oldest known societies on Earth. Emerging around 3000 BCE, at roughly the same time the first pyramids were rising in Egypt and centuries before the great empires of the Americas, this remarkable culture developed urban centers, monumental architecture, and sophisticated social organization under conditions that seem to defy conventional theories of civilization. Unlike Egypt, Mesopotamia, or later civilizations such as the Maya, it achieved these accomplishments without many of the technologies historians once considered essential. No metal tools, no confirmed writing system, no wheeled transport, and no draft animals. Perhaps even more surprising, there is almost no evidence of large-scale warfare. Its discovery forced archaeologists to rethink some of the most fundamental assumptions about how complex societies emerge and evolve. The modern story began in the 20th century, but the true significance of the region remained largely unrecognized until the 1990s. Although ruins had been noticed earlier, it was not until archaeologist Ruth Shady began systematic excavations at Cajral in 1994 that researchers realized they were looking at something extraordinary. Radiocarbon dating soon produced shocking results. The monumental structures were not from the Inca period, nor even from later Andean cultures. Some samples dated to nearly 5,000 years ago. Suddenly, the Americas possessed a civilization as ancient as those of the Old World. The implications were enormous. At a time when Stonehenge was still being developed in Britain and long before the rise of classical Greece or Rome, people in the Sup Valley were already building large ceremonial centers, organizing labor forces, and transforming entire landscapes. The first mystery appears immediately upon viewing the ruins themselves. Massive platform mounds, sunken circular plazas, ceremonial staircases, and carefully planned architectural complexes dominate the landscape. The larger structures at Corral rise approximately 28 meters high and contain hundreds of thousands of tons of stone and fill. Constructing such monuments would have required enormous labor coordination, yet archaeologists have found no evidence for the technological systems normally associated with large construction projects. Egypt had copper tools and the logistical advantages of the Nile. Mesopotamia relied on extensive administrative systems and written records. Norte Chico possessed neither. How thousands of workers were organized remains one of the most fascinating questions surrounding the civilization. Some researchers estimate that major construction projects may have required tens of thousands of workdays. Without written instructions, metal engineering, or military coercion, the ability to coordinate such efforts suggests a social system that is still poorly understood. Even more remarkable is the engineering hidden inside these structures. Peru sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Modern Peru experiences frequent earthquakes, some exceeding magnitude 8.0. Over thousands of years, any ancient architecture should have faced repeated seismic destruction. Yet many Norte Chico structures survived long enough to remain identifiable after 5 millennia. The reason may lie in one of the most mysterious engineering innovations of the ancient world. Archaeologists discovered that builders filled woven plant fiber bags with stones and stacked them inside foundations and retaining walls. These bags, known as shikras, appear deceptively simple. At first glance, they resemble nothing more than primitive containers. However, modern engineering analysis suggests they may have functioned as a remarkably effective seismic stabilization system. When earthquake waves move through the ground, rigid structures tend to crack because stress concentrates at specific points. Shikra-filled foundations behave differently. The individual stone-filled bags can shift slightly relative to one another, dispersing seismic energy across a broader area. Instead of transmitting force directly upward, they absorb and redistribute vibrations. In principle, the system functions somewhat like modern base isolation techniques used in earthquake-resistant buildings. This raises an extraordinary question. Did Norte Chico engineers accidentally discover a seismic technology that modern science would only formally understand thousands of years later? Or did generations of observation gradually teach them which construction methods survived earthquakes best? Researchers remain divided. Experimental studies have shown that shikra systems can improve structural resilience under certain conditions, but nobody knows whether ancient builders consciously understood the physics involved. The mystery becomes even deeper when considering the scale of implementation. These were not isolated engineering experiments. Similar techniques appear across multiple sites in the region, suggesting a widespread tradition of construction knowledge. Somehow, a civilization without metallurgy developed building methods that may have significantly increased earthquake resistance in one of the most dangerous seismic environments on Earth. Another puzzle concerns communication and administration. Every large civilization requires mechanisms for organizing resources, labor, and food distribution. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets recorded transactions. In Egypt, hieroglyphs documented state activities. Norte Chico offers no confirmed writing system, yet the archaeological evidence clearly indicates complex social organization. Irrigation canals had to be maintained. Agricultural production had to be coordinated. Monumental construction projects required planning extending over years or decades. How was information stored and transmitted? Some researchers point to intriguing discoveries resembling early quipu systems. Quipu, later used extensively by the Inca, consisted of cords and knots capable of recording numerical information. Fragments discovered at Corral have fueled speculation that an ancestral form of this technology may already have existed thousands of years earlier. If true, Norte Chico may have developed one of the earliest non-written information storage systems in human history. Such a possibility would challenge the assumption that writing is a prerequisite for complex administration. Yet evidence remains limited, and the debate continues. The civilization's economic foundations are equally surprising. Traditional theories once argued that civilization emerged primarily through intensive grain agriculture. Norte Chico complicated this model. The surrounding environment is among the driest desert regions in the world. Rainfall is extremely limited. Nevertheless, archaeological evidence reveals thriving communities connected through sophisticated irrigation networks. Cotton appears to have played a crucial role. Rather than serving primarily as food, cotton supported fishing economies by providing material for nets and ropes. Marine resources from the Pacific Ocean supplied vast quantities of protein. Anchovies, sardines, shellfish, and other seafood may have sustained large populations. This unusual combination of agriculture and maritime exploitation created an economic system unlike those seen in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Some scholars have described Norte Chico as one of the world's earliest maritime civilizations. Then there is the strange absence of warfare. Throughout ancient history, major civilizations typically leave evidence of conflict. Fortifications, defensive walls, weapons caches, burned settlements, and mass graves frequently accompany urban development. Norte Chico presents a different picture. Archaeologists have uncovered very little evidence for organized warfare. There are no massive defensive structures surrounding major ceremonial centers. Weapons are rare. Signs of large-scale, violent conflict remain minimal. This does not necessarily mean the society was completely peaceful, but compared to many contemporary civilizations, the contrast is striking. Religion likely played a key role in uniting Norte Chico society. Its architecture was designed for ceremonies, with sunken plazas for large gatherings and staircases leading to ritual spaces. Musical instruments such as bone flutes suggest that music and public rituals helped strengthen social cohesion. The plaza's acoustics may have amplified voices and music, making ceremonies even more influential. How do you think Norte Chico achieved such extraordinary engineering and social organization more than 5,000 years ago? Let us know your theory in the comments below.